The night Luca Moretti was brought into Street Catherine's emergency room, every monitor in the trauma bay began screaming at once. Not because of his wounds, because every person in that room knew who he was. A man like Luca did not arrive at a hospital. He was delivered like a warning. The ambulance doors burst open beneath the flashing red lights. Rain hammering the pavement so hard it looked like the sky was trying to erase the city. 2 paramedics rushed the stretcher through the entrance, their faces pale, their uniforms soaked. Behind them came 4 men in black suits, silent as shadows, weapons hidden, but somehow still felt by everyone who saw them. The waiting room went dead quiet. A woman holding a feverish child stopped whispering. A police officer near the vending machine lowered his coffee and stepped back. Even the security guard, who had spent 10 years pretending not to fear anyone, moved away from the automatic doors. On the stretcher, Luca Moretti lay bleeding through a torn black shirt, his dark hair wet against his forehead, his jaw clenched, even while unconscious. There was blood on his chest, blood on his hands, blood trailing down the white sheet beneath him, but he still looked dangerous, as if death itself would hesitate before touching him. "Trauma Bay 3, someone shouted. Doctors moved fast until they saw his face. Then the room shifted. Not stopped. Shifted. Fear entered before the patient did. Dr. Calloway froze for half a second too long. Nurse Beth whispered, "Oh my God." One intern backed into a supply cart, sending metal trays clattering across the floor. Everyone knew the rumors. Luca Moretti owned half the city without his name appearing on a single document. Men disappeared after betraying him. Judges lowered their voices when his family was mentioned. Police officers pretended not to recognize his cars. And now, the monster of Chicago was bleeding out under hospital lights. "Move," a cold voice ordered. One of Luca's men stepped forward, tall, expressionless, rain dripping from his black coat. "If he dies," the man said, looking around the room, "everyone in here answers for it." No one breathed. Then Elena Carter pushed through the frozen crowd. She was young compared to the others, a nurse in blue scrubs with dark brown hair tied in a loose, messy knot, exhaustion under her eyes from a double shift she couldn't afford to refuse. There was a coffee stain on her sleeve, a small cut across one knuckle, a life so ordinary, so fragile. It should have vanished under the weight of men like these. But she walked straight to Luca's stretcher. "Back away from my patient," she said. The bodyguard turned his head slowly. The room went colder. Dr. Calloway whispered, "Elena." But she didn't look at him. She looked at the man blocking her access to the bleeding body on the bed. "I said," Elena repeated, voice steady though her pulse was pounding. "Back away." For one terrifying second, no one moved. Then the bodyguard looked down at Luca. Luca's fingers twitched, barely. A broken movement. A dying man's reflex. But his hand caught the edge of Elena's sleeve. The entire room saw it. His blood-streaked fingers curled weakly into the fabric as if, even unconscious, he had chosen her from the chaos. Elena looked down. His grip was not strong, but it felt like a command. The monitors shrieked again. "Blood pressure's dropping," Beth said, voice trembling. Elena snapped into motion. "Cut the shirt. 2 large bore 4s. Type and cross. Prep for intubation. Call surgery now." Her voice sliced through the fear cleanly enough that people obeyed before remembering they were afraid. A doctor moved. Then another nurse. Then the room came alive around her. Elena leaned over Luca, pressing gauze hard against the wound near his ribs. Warm blood soaked through her gloves almost instantly. His eyes opened, just a slit, dark, unfocused, burning. For half a heartbeat, the most feared man in the city looked directly at her, not at the doctors, not at his men. Here, his lips parted. No sound came out at first. Elena leaned closer despite herself. Rain battered the windows. The monitors screamed. His bodyguards watched like statues with loaded silence. Then, Luca Moretti whispered 2 words so softly only she could hear them. "Don't leave." Elena's breath caught. There was no threat in his voice. No power. No command. Only something raw beneath all that blood and violence. Something almost human. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, pressing harder against his wound. His eyes stayed on hers, like he was trying to memorize her face before darkness took him. Then the trauma bay doors slammed open again. A man in a grey suit entered with 2 police officers behind him. The bodyguards instantly reached beneath their coats. The doctors froze again. Elena looked up, still holding pressure on Luca's wound. The man in grey smiled. It was not the smile of someone coming to help. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for Luca Moretti to become weak. "Step away from him," he said. Elena's hands tightened over the blood-soaked gauze. "Who are you?" The man's eyes flicked to her badge, then to Luca's hand, still gripping her sleeve. His smile faded. "Well?" he said quietly. "That's interesting." Luca's monitor gave one long, unstable beep, and Elena realized the most dangerous man in the room might not be the one bleeding beneath her hands. Elena Carter had learned long ago that fear had a sound. Sometimes it was loud. A scream in an alley, a fist against a door, a mother crying into her hands because the bill was higher than the paycheck. But most of the time, fear was quiet. It was the silence inside her apartment when she came home after midnight and realized there was no one waiting for her. It was the hum of the refrigerator, the flicker of the hallway light, the envelope from the landlord pushed halfway under the door. It was the way she stood in the shower too long, because the hot water made her feel held for a few minutes. That was the kind of fear Elena knew best. The slow kind. The kind that didn't point a gun. The kind that drained you one unpaid bill at a time. Before Luca Moretti arrived, bleeding into her emergency room, Elena's life had been painfully ordinary. She worked double shifts at Street Catherine's because ordinary people did not get rescued. They survived by learning how little sleep the body truly needed. Her apartment sat above a closed laundromat on the west side, where the windows rattled when trucks passed and the radiator coughed like an old man all winter. The lock on her front door stuck when it rained. The ceiling above the kitchen had a brown stain that grew every month no matter how many times she called maintenance. On her small table, beside a chipped mug and a stack of overdue envelopes, sat a framed photograph of her mother. Soft smile, tired eyes. The kind of woman who had taught Elena to be gentle in a world that punished gentleness. "You don't have to become hard to survive," her mother used to say. Elena had believed that once. Now, every morning before work, she looked at that photo and wondered if survival had taken something from her anyway. She was 28, though some days her bones felt older. She had no husband, no boyfriend, no family left in the city except an aunt who called twice a year and always asked if Elena had found someone yet, as if loneliness were a missing item under the couch. Elena told people she liked being alone. It was easier than explaining that she had simply gotten used to not being chosen. At the hospital, she was useful, competent, calm under pressure. The nurse-doctors asked for during messy trauma nights, because Elena did not panic when blood hit the floor. She knew how to hold a wound closed, how to talk a teenager through an overdose, how to tell a wife to sit down before saying the word critical. She knew how to keep her hands steady even when her heart was not. But after the shift ended, when the automatic doors slid open and the city swallowed her again, Elena became invisible. Just another tired woman walking home beneath streetlights that buzzed like dying insects. That night, before Luca, she had been on hour 14 of a 16-hour shift. Her feet hurt. Her back ached. She had eaten half a protein bar in the supply closet and called it dinner. Doctor Calloway had snapped at her over a missing chart he later found under his own clipboard and never apologized for. Beth had cried in the medication room because her divorce lawyer called during lunch. Everything felt normal, brutal, exhausting, normal. Then, Elena's phone vibrated in her scrub pocket. She checked it between patients. Landlord. Rent is late again. I can't keep covering for you. Full amount by Friday or we need to discuss eviction. Elena stared at the message until the letters blurred. Friday. 3 days. She locked the screen and slipped the phone back into her pocket as if the problem could be hidden with it. Elena? Beth called from the nurse's station. Room 12 needs discharge papers. On it. Her voice came out steady. It always did. That was her gift and her curse. No one knew when Elena Carter was falling apart. Not when her mother died and she came back to work 6 days later, because funeral costs had eaten her savings. Not when the collection agency started calling. Not when she sold her mother's gold bracelet to pay for a car repair and cried in the pawn shop bathroom afterward. Not when the man she once loved told her she was too much sadness to build a life around. Elena had simply smiled less after that. Worked more. Needed nothing. Asked for less than nothing. Because need made people cruel. And Elena was tired of offering the softest parts of herself to people who only knew how to bruise them. By midnight, the emergency room had thinned into that strange, fluorescent quiet that came after chaos. The waiting room smelled like stale coffee and rain-soaked coats. A janitor moved slowly near the vending machines, pushing a mop through reflected strips of white light. Elena stood at the medication cart, rubbing sanitizer between her hands, when Beth leaned beside her. You look like death. Thank you. That's exactly the look I was going for. Beth gave a tired laugh. Go home after this shift. I am. I mean, actually sleep when you get there. Elena smiled faintly. That sounds expensive. Beth's expression softened. Rent again? Elena looked away too fast. Elena, I'm fine. You always say that, because eventually it becomes true. Beth didn't answer. For a moment. The only sound was a monitor beeping steadily from down the hall. Then Beth said quietly, You know you can ask for help. Elena's throat tightened. She hated those words. Not because they were unkind, because they were impossible. Help was never free. It came with pity, with questions, with people looking at you differently afterward. Elena had spent years building a face no one worried about. She didn't know who she would be if that face cracked, so she shrugged. I'll pick up extra shifts. Beth's eyes filled with the kind of concern Elena couldn't afford to receive. Before Beth could speak again, shouting erupted near the entrance. At first, Elena thought it was another drunk patient, another panic attack, another man angry because waiting rooms did not revolve around him. Then the automatic doors opened. Rain rushed in, and with it came the kind of silence that had teeth. The paramedics entered first. Then the men in black suits. Then the stretcher. Elena saw blood before she saw his face. A lot of it. Too much. Dark red spreading across a white sheet, dripping down the metal frame, marking the floor in a trail that looked almost deliberate. Multiple penetrating wounds, one paramedic shouted. BP unstable. Lost consciousness twice en route. The emergency room changed around her. Dr. Calloway stepped forward, then stopped. Beth inhaled sharply. Someone whispered a name. Moretti. The name moved through the ER faster than the stretcher. Elena had heard it before, of course. Everyone in Chicago had. Luca Moretti was not the kind of man people discussed openly. His name appeared in conversations the way a storm appeared on the horizon noticed, feared, never invited closer. He owned restaurants nobody could afford, buildings with no signs, men with clean records and dead eyes. He was blamed for things no court could prove and credited for things no police officer would say out loud. Luca Moretti was power wrapped in silence, and now he was bleeding under her lights. Elena expected him to look monstrous. He didn't. That was worse. He looked like a man carved from danger and ruin. Dark hair soaked with rain, skin pale beneath blood. Jaw locked, like even unconsciousness had to fight for permission. There was violence in his body, yes, but there was also something else. Exhaustion. Not physical, deeper, the kind Elena recognized, because she carried her own version of it beneath her ribs every day. His bodyguards surrounded the stretcher with controlled menace, but Elena barely noticed them after the first few seconds. She was looking at Luca's hand. Blood covered his fingers. The knuckles were bruised, but his palm was open, empty. For one irrational second, Elena thought he looked like a man reaching for something he had lost. Then his body seized. The monitors screamed, the room froze, and Elena moved. She didn't think about his name. She didn't think about the men with weapons hidden beneath expensive coats. She didn't think about the rumors, the bodies, the fear suddenly pressing against every wall. She thought about pressure, airway, blood loss, pulse. Life reduced to the simple, brutal mathematics of whether her hands moved fast enough. Back away from my patient. The words left her before she knew she had chosen them. Every eye turned toward her. The bodyguard looked at Elena as if she had stepped in front of a moving car and ordered it to stop. Maybe she had, but Luca was crashing, and Elena knew something about crashing quietly while everyone stood around deciding whether you were worth saving. So she did what no one else did. She stepped closer. When Luca's fingers caught her sleeve, the contact shocked her so deeply she almost pulled away. Not because he was frightening, because his touch was weak. The most feared man in Chicago could barely hold a piece of fabric. His eyes opened a fraction. Dark eyes. Not cruel in that moment, just desperate. Don't leave. The words slipped under Elena's skin before she could protect herself from them. She had heard patients beg before. Please, help me. Please don't let me die. Please call my wife. But this was different. He didn't ask her to save him. He asked her to stay. And the terrible truth was that Elena understood the difference. I'm not going anywhere, she told him. And for 1 second, under the screaming monitors and rain-blurred windows, something invisible passed between them. Not romance, not trust. Something more dangerous. Recognition. Two people who knew what it meant to bleed where no one could see. Then the man in the grey suit entered. Everything inside Elena tightened. He did not move like a doctor. He did not move like police. He moved like someone who had rehearsed this moment. Calm, patient, satisfied. The officers behind him looked uncomfortable, which frightened Elena more than their guns. Step away from him, the man said. Elena kept both hands pressed to Luca's wound. He needs surgery. He needs to be transferred. To where? The man's eyes cooled. That isn't your concern. Dr. Calloway stepped forward cautiously. Sir, this patient is unstable. Moving him now could kill him. The man smiled without warmth. Then stabilize him quickly. One of Luca's bodyguards shifted, his hand moving toward his coat. Elena felt the whole room tilt toward violence. Everyone stop, she snapped. The command surprised even her. The bodyguard looked at her. The man in grey looked at her. Even the officers looked at her. Elena's hands were covered in Luca Moretti's blood. Her hair had fallen loose around her face. Her heart was slamming so hard she felt it in her throat. But her voice did not shake. This is an emergency room, she said, not a battlefield. The man in grey studied her, and this time his attention felt personal, too personal. Elena Carter, he read from her badge. Her stomach tightened. You're brave, he said. She hated the way he said it. Like bravery was a flaw he could use. I'm busy, she replied. For the first time, Luca moved again, a faint tightening of his fingers against her sleeve. His eyes opened just enough to find the man in grey. Something changed in the air. Even half dead, Luca's presence darkened the room. The man in grey leaned closer, voice soft enough that only Elena and Luca could hear. "You should have stayed dead in the alley, Moretti." Elena went cold. This wasn't a transfer. This was a second attempt. Luca's gaze flicked to Elena. There was warning in it now. Not fear. Warning. As if he knew that by touching her sleeve, by whispering those two words, he had pulled her into something she would never escape cleanly. The monitor beeped again, unstable and sharp. Beth whispered, "Elena." Pressure's falling. Elena made a decision before she understood its consequences. She leaned over Luca, blocking the man in grey's view of him. "Get surgery down here now," she said. "And nobody moves him." The man's smile disappeared completely. "You don't know what you're interfering with." Elena looked at the blood beneath her hands, then at Luca Moretti's eyes, then back at the man who had walked into her emergency room wearing authority like a disguise. "No," she said quietly. "But I know what happens if I let go." For the first time that night, the man in grey looked truly angry. Behind him, one of the officers reached for his radio. Behind Elena, Luca's bodyguards stepped forward, and beneath her palms, Luca Moretti's heart beat once, hard, as if answering hers. The man in the grey suit did not raise his voice. That was what made him terrifying. Men who screamed wanted to be feared. Men like him already were. He stood at the foot of Luca Moretti's trauma bed with rainwater shining on his polished shoes, watching Elena Carter press both hands into a wound that refused to stop bleeding. Around them, the emergency room had become something no hospital was meant to be. Too quiet, too tense, too full of men pretending their hands were not inches from weapons. "Elena," Dr. Calloway said carefully, "we need to move him upstairs." "No," she said. The word cut through the room. Calloway stared at her. "What?" "He'll die in the elevator." "That's not your call." "It is if I'm the one keeping pressure on his artery." The doctor's jaw tightened. Elena had worked under him long enough to know the look. Men like Calloway were comfortable dismissing nurses until the room was burning, and the nurse was the only one who knew where the exits were. "Elena," he said lower. "Step back." Luca's fingers tightened around her sleeve. Barely, but enough. The man in grey noticed. His eyes dropped to that small, blood-smeared grip, and something cruel settled behind his expression. "This is touching," he said. "But dangerous loyalty is still dangerous." "I'm not loyal to him," Elena said. "I'm treating him." Of course. The way he said it made her skin crawl. He turned slightly toward the officers behind him. "Remove her." The younger officer hesitated. "Sir, she's medical staff. She is obstructing a lawful transfer." "No transfer order has been entered," Elena said. The man in grey looked at her again, slower this time. "Elena Carter," he said, as if tasting the name. 28. Registered nurse. Mother deceased. Father absent. 1-bedroom apartment on West Armitage above a laundromat. Rent overdue. Student loans in default. The room blurred at the edges. Elena felt Beth look at her, felt Calloway look at her, felt the humiliation land before she could defend herself. The man smiled. "There," he said softly. "Now we know each other." Elena's hands remained pressed against Luca's wound, but inside, something buckled. Not because he knew, because everyone else now did too. Her poverty, her loneliness, her private little failures. The life she had tried so hard to keep folded neatly under her scrubs had just been thrown onto the floor for strangers to step over. Luca's eyes opened. Not fully, but enough. His gaze fixed on the man in grey, and the monitors changed. His pulse, weak and uneven before, kicked harder. The bodyguard closest to the bed took one step forward. The man in grey did not move. "Careful," he murmured. "He's not in a position to protect anyone." Elena felt Luca's grip tremble against her sleeve. For the first time, she understood something about him that the rumors had never said. Luca Moretti did not fear death. He feared helplessness. And right now, helplessness was humiliating him worse than blood loss ever could. "Stop talking," Elena said. The man's eyes flicked back to her. "Excuse me? You're raising his blood pressure." A beat of silence. Then Beth let out the smallest, nervous breath, almost a laugh. The man in gray's face hardened. "Elena," Calloway warned. But Elena had already crossed whatever invisible line had kept everyone else obedient. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the rent notice sitting on her phone like a death sentence. Maybe it was the way Luca Moretti, monster of Chicago, had looked at her and said "don't leave" in a voice that sounded too much like her own heart on the nights no one came for her. Whatever it was, it made her lift her chin. "He needs surgery," she said. "Not a power show." The man in gray stepped closer. Luca's bodyguards reacted instantly. 3 black coats shifted. 3 hands moved. The officers raised theirs halfway, panic flashing across their faces. "Enough," Elena snapped. This time no one ignored her. Her voice cracked across the trauma bay like glass breaking. She looked around the room, blood on her gloves, hair loose around her face, eyes bright with fury and fear she refused to surrender to. "If anyone pulls a weapon in my ER, he dies," she said. "And every single person here knows it." The younger officer swallowed. Beth's hands shook over the IV tubing. Calloway looked like he wanted to yell at her but could not find a version of reality where she was wrong. The man in gray tilted his head. "You think his life matters to me?" Elena went very still. There it was, the truth, slipping out in the space between arrogance and impatience. The bodyguard beside her heard it too. His face did not change, but the air around him did. "Elena, Luca raspit." The sound was almost nothing. Still, it pulled her down toward him. His eyes were open now, dark with pain, but focused. "Don't argue." She pressed harder against the wound. "Don't talk." His mouth moved with the ghost of something that might have been a smile if he were not half dead. "Boss." The absurdity of it nearly broke her. A laugh caught in her throat and died there. His gaze shifted past her, toward the man in gray. "Voss." Luca breathed. The name changed the room again. The bodyguards went rigid. The older police officer looked away. Elena heard Beth whisper, "Oh no, Voss." She knew that name too. Not from tabloids. Not from rumors. From hospital charity galas where powerful men donated money in exchange for clean photographs. From news segments about anti-crime task forces. From polished speeches about saving Chicago from corruption. Marcus Voss, deputy commissioner, public hero, future mayor, if the headlines were to be believed. And he was standing in her trauma bay telling a dying man he should have stayed dead in an alley. Elena's stomach turned. Voss noticed the recognition in her face and smiled again. "Careful, Nurse Carter," he said. "You're beginning to understand things that could make your life very difficult." Before she could answer, the trauma bay doors opened. A surgical resident rushed in, followed by 2 orderlies. "We've got O2 ready," the resident said. "Anesthesia is coming down now." "No," Voss said. The resident froze. "I'm sorry." "He is being transferred to federal custody." "There's no federal team here," Elena said. Voss's eyes sharpened. She didn't know why she said it, only that once the words came out, the lie became visible. No federal badges, no paperwork, no ambulance waiting. Just Voss, 2 uncomfortable city officers, and a room full of people too afraid to ask why. Elena looked at the younger officer. "What precinct are you from?" He blinked. "Ma'am, what precinct?" Voss turned his head slowly toward him. The officer's mouth closed. That silence told Elena everything. Luca made a sound, a low breath of pain that brought her attention back down. His skin had gone grayer, blood soaked through the second layer of gauze. "We are out of time," she said. Calloway looked at the monitor, then at Voss, torn between fear and duty. For one awful second, Elena thought he would choose fear. Then Beth stepped forward. "I'll get the crash cart ready for transport." Elena looked at her. Beth's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. The surgical resident cleared his throat. "I need him upstairs now." Voss's smile disappeared. "You are all making a serious mistake." "No," Elena said. "We're doing our jobs." Voss moved toward her so suddenly that Luca's bodyguard blocked him. The room nearly exploded. The bodyguard was enormous, his face expressionless, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Take one more step toward her." Voss looked him up and down. "You'd threaten a deputy commissioner in front of witnesses?" "No," the bodyguard said. "I'd make sure there weren't any." The officers went pale. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. "Stop," she said again, but this time her voice was quieter. Luca's eyes found hers. There was something in them now she could not name. Not gratitude, not simply pain, a warning becoming a promise. The resident unlocked the bed. "Move." Everything happened at once. Beth squeezed the IV bag. Calloway climbed onto the side rail to keep pressure where Elena's hands had been. The orderlies pulled the stretcher toward the doors. Luca's men formed a black wall around him. Elena tried to step back. Luca's hand caught her again. His grip was stronger this time. Not much, but enough to stop her. "Elena," Beth said, startled. Luca did not look at Beth. He looked only at Elena. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. His voice was torn to almost nothing. "Call me." One word. Not a plea this time. Not quite a command either. Something in between. Something that made the room hold its breath. Elena stared at him. She should have said no. She should have pulled her sleeve free. She should have remembered that men like Luca Moretti did not ask women into their world. They dragged them in and called it destiny after the damage was done. But Voss was watching her now, and in his eyes, she saw the moment he decided she had become a problem. Not later. "Now, Elena," Calloway said, voice tight. "We need another nurse upstairs." That was not true. They both knew it. But it gave her a reason. A fragile, professional, paper-thin reason to stay beside the man everyone feared and the man everyone obeyed. Elena walked with the stretcher. The moment she passed Voss, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. "You just chose the wrong devil." Elena did not look at him, but Luca did. Half-conscious, bleeding, barely alive. Luca turned his head on the pillow and looked at Marcus Voss with such cold hatred that even the officers stepped back. Then his eyes shifted to Elena, softened by one impossible degree. "No," Luca whispered. His fingers tightened around her sleeve. She chose the only one who won't lie to her. The elevator doors opened. Elena stepped inside with Luca, Beth, Calloway, and 2 silent bodyguards. Just before the doors closed, she saw Voss standing in the hallway, no longer smiling. His lips moved. She could not hear the words, but she understood them anyway. "This is not over." The elevator began to rise. For 3 floors, no one spoke. The fluorescent light above them flickered. The stretcher wheels rattled softly. Beth kept pressure on the IV bag, her hands trembling. Calloway watched the monitor like it might betray him. Elena stood at Luca's side, her sleeve still trapped in his bloody hand. "You should let go," she said quietly. Luca's eyes opened a sliver. "No, you're going into surgery. I heard. You can't hold my sleeve during surgery." His gaze moved over her face, slow despite the pain. "Then stay where I can find you when I wake up." Her throat tightened before she could stop it. "You don't even know me." Something dark moved through his expression. "I know fear," he whispered. "And I know when someone refuses to bow to it." The elevator doors opened onto the surgical floor. The team rushed him forward beneath bright white lights. At the OR entrance, a nurse stopped Elena. "You can't go farther." Elena knew that. Of course she knew that, but Luca still had not let go. For a second, the whole hallway seemed to wait. Elena leaned down and gently peeled his fingers from her sleeve one by one. His hand fell against the sheet, empty again. She should have been relieved. Instead, the absence of his touch felt strangely cold. "I'll be here," she said. Luca's eyes locked onto hers. "You promise?" No one had asked Elena for a promise in years. Not one they truly needed. Not one that sounded like the last thread tying them to the world. So she gave it. "I promise." They wheeled him through the OR doors. And then, he was gone. The hallway swallowed the sound of the stretcher. The doors closed with a soft mechanical sigh, leaving Elena standing beneath the lights with blood drying on her gloves and a storm building somewhere inside her chest. Beth came up beside her. "Elena," she whispered. "What the hell just happened?" Elena looked down at her sleeve. Luca's blood had soaked into the fabric where his fingers had held on. Before she could answer, her phone vibrated. Once, then again. She pulled it from her pocket with shaking hands. Unknown number. There was no text, only a photo. Her apartment door, taken from the hallway outside. Then, a message appeared beneath it. "You should have stepped away from him." The photograph on Elena's phone was not blurry. That was what made it worse. Whoever had taken it had not been rushing. They had stood in the hallway outside her apartment, long enough to frame the shot perfectly. The chipped green paint on her door, the crooked number 3B, the weak yellow bulb above the stairwell, casting a dirty halo over the lock that stuck when it rained. Her home, her small, tired, broken little corner of the world, now turned into a threat. Beth saw the color leave Elena's face. "What is it?" Elena couldn't answer. The second message arrived. Before she could breathe. "Go home, Nurse Carter." Alone, a cold wave moved through her body. The surgical floor hummed around her as if nothing had changed. Nurses passed with charts. An anesthesiologist pushed through double doors. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in a steady rhythm. But Elena felt as if the world had narrowed to the glowing screen in her shaking hand. Beth reached for the phone. "Elena?" Elena locked it too fast. "Nothing." "Elena." "I said nothing." The lie sounded thin and frightened. Even to her, Beth's expression changed from concern to fear. "Was that from him? Voss?" "I don't know." But she did. Not for certain. Not in any way she could prove. But some truths did not need fingerprints. Marcus Voss had looked at her like a man deciding where to bury a problem. And now, someone was standing outside her apartment. Elena stepped back until her shoulders touched the wall. Her breath came too shallow. She stared at the closed operating room doors, where Luca Moretti was somewhere beyond them, cut open beneath bright lights, fighting for his life, while the city's polished hero tried to make sure he never woke up. She should leave. That was the smart thing. Take off the bloody gloves. Clock out. Go to security. Call the police. Except the police had come with Voss. Her chest tightened. "Elena, talk to me," Beth whispered. Elena swallowed hard. "Someone sent me a picture of my apartment door." Beth's lips parted. "They said I should have stepped away from him." For a moment, Beth said nothing. Then she looked toward the operating room doors. Oh, may God. That was exactly what Elena felt. Not fear now. Something beyond fear. A realization, opening beneath her feet. She had not just saved a patient. She had stepped into a war. "Elena, you can't go home," Beth said. "I know. You need to report this." To who? Beth had no answer, because both of them knew what they had seen downstairs. Officers obeying Voss, doctors stepping aside, men with titles moving like criminals and criminals standing like soldiers. The world had turned upside down in one night, and somehow Elena Carter was standing at the center of it, with dried blood on her sleeve. The OR doors opened suddenly. A nurse came out fast, eyes scanning the hallway. "Carter?" Elena straightened. Yes? Dr. Harrow wants you inside the outer scrub area. Beth frowned. She's not surgical staff for this case. I know. He asked for her specifically. Elena's stomach dropped. Why? The nurse hesitated. Then she looked at the blood-stained sleeve. He won't stabilize. The hallway went silent around Elena. He's under anesthesia, Beth said. What do you mean he won't stabilize? The nurse lowered her voice. Every time they try to fully sedate him, his pressure crashes. He keeps reacting when anyone touches his right hand. Elena looked down. Her sleeve, the one he had held onto. That doesn't make sense, Beth whispered. No, it didn't. But nothing about this night made sense anymore. Elena followed the nurse through the first set of doors, into the bright, sterile chill of the surgical wing. The smell of antiseptic hit her hard. She washed her hands, changed gloves, tied a disposable gown over her scrubs, though no one seemed to know exactly what role she was supposed to play. Inside the outer area, through a wide observation window, she could see him. Luca Moretti lay under surgical lights, his face pale, his body draped in blue, tubes and lines running from him like the hospital was trying to anchor him to life. Machines surrounded him. Surgeons moved with controlled urgency. Blood transferred through clear tubing. He looked less like a monster now, more like a man stripped down to the truth. Fragile, breakable, mortal. And Elena hated the ache that moved through her when she saw him that way. A surgeon with silver hair turned from the table. You're Carter? Yes. I'm Dr. Harrow. He said your name. Elena froze. He's unconscious. He said it before induction. Then again when we tried to move his hand. Harrow's face was unreadable. I don't care what relationship you have with him. I care that his body is responding to your voice. Stand where he can hear you. We don't have a relationship. Harrow looked through the window at Luca's blood pressure on the monitor. Then improvise one. Before Elena could respond, one of Luca's bodyguards appeared at the end of the sterile hall. Not the one who had threatened Voss. Another man. Older. Severe. With a scar running from his temple into his beard. He was not supposed to be there. Security should have stopped him. No one had. He looked at Elena through the glass. Then he did something she did not expect. He bowed his head. Not deeply. Not dramatically. But enough. Respect. Or recognition. Elena stepped closer to the small speaker built into the observation wall. Her voice felt foolish at first. Too soft for a man like Luca. Luca. The monitor jumped. Not dangerously. Just enough. that Dr. Harrow's eyes flicked up. Elena's throat tightened. "You're in surgery," she said, forcing her voice steady. "You're not in the alley. You're not with Voss. You're at Street Catherine's." One of the surgeons glanced toward the window. "You need to stay still," Elena continued. "Let them help you." The machines beeped. Rain tapped against a high window somewhere beyond the hall. Elena pressed her palm lightly against the glass, though he could not see it. "You told me not to leave," she whispered. "I'm here." The monitor steadied. Not completely, but enough that Dr. Harrow said, "Keep talking." So Elena did. She talked to the most feared man in Chicago, as if he were just another frightened patient in the dark. She told him the surgeons were working, that his men were outside, that Beth was safe, that he needed to breathe with the machine, that whatever Voss had done, he had not won yet. She did not know whether Luca could hear every word, but his body listened. Minute by minute, the numbers improved, and with every steady beep, Elena felt herself being pulled deeper into something she had no name for. The older bodyguard stepped beside her, leaving a respectful distance. "You're good for him," he said. Elena did not look at him. "I'm doing my job." "No," he said quietly. "You're doing what no one has been allowed to do for years." That made her turn. "What does that mean?" The man's eyes stayed on Luca through the glass. "It means he trusts your voice." Elena almost laughed. "That's impossible. He met me tonight. The bodyguard's expression remained still. Luca Moretti does not measure trust in time. What does he measure it in? The man looked at her then. Who stays when death enters the room? Elena had no answer. Inside the OR, a surgeon called for another clamp. Harrow's voice cut through the glass, calm and exact. The room moved in a violent ballet of blood and precision. Elena turned back. "Who are you?" she asked. "Dominic." "One of his men?" Dominic's mouth barely moved. "One of his oldest." "Then tell me why Voss wants him dead." Dominic's silence was immediate. Too immediate. Elena faced him fully. "I received a photo of my apartment door. Someone is outside my home because I refuse to let your boss die. So if I'm in danger now, I deserve to know why." Dominic looked at the phone in her hand. For the first time, his composure cracked. Only slightly, but she saw it. "Show me." Elena hesitated, then handed him the phone. Dominic stared at the photograph. His jaw hardened. "Do not go there. I wasn't planning on taking advice from strangers with guns. You should tonight." "Is it Voss?" Dominic's eyes rose to hers. "It is one of his people." Her stomach sank. "Why would a deputy commissioner send someone to my apartment?" "Because you became a witness." "To what?" Dominic looked through the glass again. Inside, Luca's chest rose and fell under the rhythm of machines. To the first time, Marcus Voss failed to kill him. The words landed heavily. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. "The alley," she said. Dominic nodded once. "It was an ambush. It was a meeting." "With Voss?" "No." Dominic's voice lowered. "With someone Luca believed was dead." The air seemed to thin. Elena looked at him, waiting. Dominic's expression hardened as if every word cost him loyalty. Luca went there because he received proof that his younger brother, Matteo, was alive. Elena started. "But the Moretti brother died years ago. That is what the city was told." "And Voss?" "Voss was there when Matteo disappeared." Elena turned back to the operating room, trying to understand the shape of the story unfolding in blood and shadow. A dead brother. A corrupt deputy commissioner. A Mafia boss nearly murdered before he could learn the truth. And somehow her name now connected to all of it. Why would Luca believe the message? Dominic reached into his coat slowly, careful not to frighten her, and removed a folded piece of paper sealed inside a plastic evidence sleeve. He did not hand it to her. He only showed it. A photograph. Old. Bent at the corner. 2 boys stood beside a black car in winter coats. One older, already serious, already carrying too much pride in his small shoulders. One younger, smiling wide, gripping the older boy's hand. On the back, written in uneven blue ink, were 4 words. "You stopped looking, brother." Elena felt something inside her soften despite herself. Matteo sent that? That's what Luca thought. "You don't?" Dominic's face darkened. "I think someone used Matteo's ghost to bring Luca into the open." Inside the OR, the machines suddenly screamed. Elena spun toward the glass. Dr. Harrow barked an order. A nurse moved fast, blood pressure dropping, heart rate erratic. The clean rhythm shattered into chaos. "What happened?" Elena whispered. No one answered, because no one in that room had time. Elena stepped closer to the speaker. "Luca." No response. The monitor screamed again. "Luca, listen to me." Harrow looked sharply toward the window. "He's crashing." Elena's palm hit the glass. "No," she said, voice breaking before she could stop it. "No, you don't get to do this." Dominic stood motionless beside her, but his face had gone ashen. Elena leaned into the speaker, every wall she had built around herself collapsing in one desperate breath. "You told me to stay," she said. "So stay. Do you hear me? You don't get to drag me into your nightmare and then leave me alone in it." The monitor faltered. "Elena," Dominic said quietly. She ignored him. "Luca Moretti, if you can hear me, fight." The line jerked. Once. Then again. Dr. Harrow shouted, "We have rhythm!" Elena closed her eyes. For one fragile second, relief nearly took her knees out from under her. Then her phone vibrated in Dominic's hand. He looked down. His entire expression changed. Not fear. Something colder. He handed the phone back to her. A new message glowed on the screen. This time, it was not a photograph of her door. It was a photograph of her mother's grave. Fresh roses lay across the stone. Black roses. Beneath the image was one sentence. "Ask Moretti what really happened to your father." Elena could not move. The world stopped making sense. Her father, the man who had vanished before she was old enough to remember his voice. The man her mother never spoke of without looking away. The man Elena had buried in her mind as an absence, not a mystery. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Dominic saw the message. For the first time, the old bodyguard looked at her not like a nurse, not like a civilian, like a secret that had just walked into the room wearing blue scrubs. "Elena," he said slowly, "what was your father's name?" Her mouth was dry. "Thomas Carter." Dominic went completely still. Behind the glass, Luca's heart monitor steadied into a fragile rhythm. Elena stared at Dominic. "What?" He did not answer. "What?" she demanded, louder. Dominic looked toward the OR doors, then back at her, as if deciding whether the truth would protect her or destroy her. Finally, he spoke. "Thomas Carter wasn't just your father." Elena's blood turned cold. He was Luca Moretti's most trusted man. Elena did not understand the words at first. Not because they were complicated, because they rearranged the entire architecture of her life. Thomas Carter wasn't just your father. He was Luca Moretti's most trusted man. The surgical hallway seemed to tilt beneath her. The white walls stretched too long. The lights above her blurred into bright, merciless halos. Behind the glass, surgeons were still working over Luca's open body, machines breathing for him, blood flowing into him, keeping him trapped between death and a world that had apparently been lying to Elena since before she could form memories. "My father was a mechanic," she said. Dominic's expression did not move. "That's what my mother told me." "I know." Elena's voice sharpened. "You know?" Dominic looked away. That tiny movement did more damage than any confession could have. Elena stepped closer. "You knew my mother?" "I knew of her." "No." Her laugh was small, stunned, dangerous. "No, you don't get to answer like that. Not after saying something like this." "Elena, don't say my name like you have the right." Dominic fell silent. Beyond the glass, Luca's heart monitor gave its fragile, steady beep. It was the only calm sound left in the world. Elena pressed a hand to her stomach, suddenly nauseous. Her mother's photograph flashed through her mind. That tired smile, those soft eyes, the way she had always looked over her shoulder when strange cars passed too slowly outside their building, the way she had moved them twice before Elena turned 8, the way she never answered when Elena asked about her father, only said, "He loved us the best way he knew how." Elena had thought that meant abandonment. Now, it sounded like a warning. "What did he do for Luca?" she asked. Dominic's jaw tightened. "He kept him alive." Elena looked through the glass at the unconscious man under surgical lights. Luca Moretti, the monster of Chicago, the man who had gripped her sleeve like she was the last honest thing left in the room. "How?" Dominic took a slow breath. "Years ago, before Luca became what he is now, he inherited a war. His father was murdered. His brother disappeared. Half the city wanted the Moretti family erased. Thomas Carter was the one man Luca trusted enough to stand beside him when everyone else was choosing sides." Elena shook her head. "No, my father couldn't have been part of that." But even as she said it, her own memories betrayed her. Not memories of him, memories of the holes he left behind. Her mother taking phone calls in whispers, a locked metal box beneath the bed that Elena was never allowed to touch. a man with a scar on his cheek visiting their apartment once when Elena was 5, standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands while her mother cried silently against the kitchen counter. Elena had forgotten that man. Until now. Her eyes lifted to Dominic. His scar ran from temple to beard. The breath left her lungs. "You came to our apartment," she whispered. Dominic's face changed, only for a second, but she saw grief there. Old, buried, and still alive. "You were small," he said. "You told my mother something." "Elena, what did you tell her?" Dominic looked toward the operating room. "Not here." She laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "Not here. Someone sent me a photo of my apartment. Someone sent me a photo of my mother's grave. A corrupt deputy commissioner just tried to move a dying man out of the hospital to finish killing him, and now you're telling me my father worked for him. For Luca. It's the same world." "No," Dominic said, voice suddenly hard. "It is not." Elena stared at him. Dominic stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There are men who do evil because they enjoy power, and there are men who become feared because fear is the only language monsters respect. Luca is not innocent. I won't insult you by saying he is. But Voss is something worse. He wears the law like a priest wears a collar." Elena's phone felt heavy in her hand. "Ask Moretti what really happened to your father." Her throat tightened. What happened to him? Dominic did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. "Elena," he said quietly. "Your father died protecting something." "Protecting what?" Before Dominic could speak, the OR doors opened. Dr. Harrow stepped out, mask pulled down, surgical gown streaked with blood. His face was drawn but controlled. Elena turned so fast her body almost didn't follow. "Is he alive?" Harrow exhaled. "He is." The words hit her harder than she expected. Alive. Something inside her loosened. "He lost a lot of blood," Harrow continued. "2 penetrating wounds. One dangerously close to the liver, one lodged near the ribs. We removed a fragment. He's not out of danger, but he made it through surgery." Elena closed her eyes. For a second, the relief was so sharp it almost felt like pain. "Can I see him?" Harrow looked between her and Dominic. "He'll be in recovery under guard. Officially, only medical staff." Dominic's gaze sharpened. "And unofficially?" Harrow's mouth tightened. "Unofficially, 2 men tried to enter through the East Service corridor 10 minutes ago wearing maintenance uniforms. Security detained one. The other ran." Elena went cold. Dominic's phone was already in his hand. Harrow looked at Elena. "You were named in the threat report." "My apartment?" "Not just your apartment." His eyes softened in a way that frightened her. "A nurse downstairs received a call asking whether you were still in the building." The hallway seemed to shrink around her. Dominic spoke first. "She leaves with us." "No," Elena said immediately. He turned to her. "This is not a discussion." Her eyes flashed. "Everything about my life has apparently been discussed by strangers for 20 years. So, yes, Dominic, it is. You are not safe here. I'm not safe with Mafia bodyguards either. You were safer the moment he touched your sleeve." The words hung between them. Elena hated that some part of her believed him. Dr. Harrow looked uncomfortable. "Carter, I can arrange a room in the staff wing tonight, but if these people can get into service corridors..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Elena looked through the glass one last time, though Luca was no longer visible. The surgical team had moved him beyond the second doors. She should call Beth. She should call hospital security. She should demand police protection and pretend the system still existed as something separate from men like Marcus Voss. But Voss had walked through the ER with officers behind him. He had known her rent, her address, her dead mother, and someone knew her father. A father who had apparently died inside Luca Moretti's shadow. Elena looked at Dominic. "Where would you take me?" "A secure house." "No." A hotel under another name? No. Dominic's eyes narrowed. You prefer your apartment? I prefer answers. You'll get them when Luca wakes. And until then? Dominic's silence returned. Elena stepped toward him. Until then, I'm not disappearing into some black car with men who think explaining things is optional. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, his mouth moved with the faintest trace of grim amusement. You are Thomas Carter's daughter. Elena hated the strange, painful pride that sentence sparked in her. I'm my mother's daughter, she said. Dominic inclined his head once. Then you know how to survive men who think they own the room. Before Elena could answer, the recovery room doors opened. A nurse rolled Luca past them. He was pale, unconscious, surrounded by tubes and wires but alive. The brutality of him had been softened by anesthesia and blood loss. Without his sharp gaze, without the stillness that made everyone hesitate, he looked almost unbearably human. Elena did not mean to step closer. She did anyway. His hand rested outside the blanket, empty, still. She remembered peeling his fingers from her sleeve before surgery. You promise? I promise. The recovery nurse slowed. We're moving him to the private critical care room. Private? Elena asked. Dominic answered. The entire floor will be locked down. By the hospital? No. She looked at him sharply. Dominic did not apologize. They moved Luca down the corridor, and whether by choice or gravity, Elena followed. The private critical care room was at the end of a restricted hallway, usually reserved for donors, politicians, and people rich enough to make hospitals remember they had curtains without stains. Tonight, it transformed into a fortress. 2 of Luca's men stood at the entrance. Another guarded the service elevator. A woman Elena had never seen before sat near the nurse's station with a laptop open and a pistol resting casually beneath a folded magazine. Elena stopped walking. No weapons near ICU equipment. The woman looked up slowly. Dominic said, Sophia, put it away. Sophia's eyes moved over Elena with immediate dislike. She giving orders now? Yes, Dominic said. Sophia's expression changed. Not much, but enough that Elena realized Dominic's yes carried more weight than it should. The pistol disappeared. Inside Luca's room, the lights were dimmed. Rain streaked the window in silver lines. Machines glowed softly around him. His black hair lay damp against his forehead, and someone had cleaned most of the blood from his face, revealing bruises near his cheekbone and a small cut across his lip. Elena stood at the foot of the bed, arms wrapped around herself. This room felt too intimate, too quiet after everything. Dominic stepped beside her. He will wake, angry. Good for him. He may say things he does not mean. Most men do. Dominic glanced at her. He may try to send you away. Elena looked at Luca. Then he can try. Again, that flicker of grim amusement crossed Dominic's face. A phone rang outside. Sophia answered, listened, then looked toward Dominic. North entrance. Black sedan. Same plates from the alley. Dominic's expression hardened. Vos? Sophia shook her head. Not him. His cleanup crew. Elena's stomach twisted. Dominic turned to one of the guards. Lock the elevators. No one enters this floor without my approval. Elena stepped forward. You can't lock down a hospital floor. Dominic looked at her. In any other circumstance, she might have argued longer. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. The steady hum of the room dipped. The monitors switched to backup power with a sharp electronic chirp. Elena's blood turned cold. Outside the room, Sophia stood. Power grid just blinked. That's not weather, Dominic said. The rain beat harder against the glass. Then every phone in the room buzzed at once. Dominic looked at his. Sophia looked at hers. Elena looked at hers. A message appeared from the unknown number. You have 10 minutes to give us the nurse. The room went silent. Elena felt the words enter her body like ice. Not Luca. The nurse. Here. Dominic reached for her phone. but she pulled it back. No, Elena. No, I want to see it. Another message appeared. Or we start with Beth. Elena stopped breathing. Her hands went numb. Dominic's voice became quiet and deadly. Where is Beth? Elena's mouth barely worked. Surgical floor. Maybe locker room. Maybe downstairs. I don't know. Dominic turned. Find her. Now. Two men moved instantly. Elena grabbed his arm. Wait. If they know Beth, they know everyone close to me in this hospital. Dominic looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. They're using pressure, he said. Voss wants you scared enough to walk out. It's working. No. His gaze hardened. Fear is not the same as obedience. Elena stared at him. Those words should not have steadied her. They did. Behind them, Luca's monitor shifted. A small change. A soft rise in heart rate. Elena turned. His eyes were still closed, but his fingers twitched against the blanket. Dominic moved closer. Luca? The monitor beeped faster. Elena approached the bed before she could stop herself. Luca. His eyelids moved. Dominic leaned in. Boss. Luca's eyes opened. Not fully, but enough that the room seemed to change around him. Even weak. Even drugged. Even stitched together under bandages. Luca Moretti brought his darkness back with him. His gaze moved through the room slowly. Dominic. Sophia. The guards. The door. Then Elena. Everything in his face sharpened. Not much. Just enough. Elena Eraspet. She stepped closer. You're alive. His eyes stayed on hers. You sound surprised. I'm trying not to sound annoyed. A faint shadow of a smile touched his mouth, then vanished under pain. Dominic leaned toward him. Voss made another move. Luca's gaze did not leave Elena. Against me. Dominic hesitated. Elena answered for him. Against me. The temperature in the room dropped. Luca's eyes changed so completely that Elena felt the shift in her bones. What? He whispered. Each letter scraped raw. Did he do? Dominic handed him the phone. Elena almost protested. But Luca's hand rose weakly, demanding it without needing to speak. Dominic placed the device in his palm. Luca read the messages. The monitor began to climb. Elena moved immediately. Don't. Your pressure. Beth? Luca said. Your men are looking for her. Not enough. He tried to sit up. Pain tore through him instantly. His body locked. The machine screamed. Elena pushed him back down with both hands against his shoulders. Are you insane? His eyes burned into hers. He threatened you, and if you rip open your stitches, you help him. Luca stared at her hands on him. The guards had gone absolutely still. Elena realized too late that perhaps no one put hands on Luca Moretti like that. No one gave him orders. No one shoved him back into a hospital bed. But Luca did not look angry at her. He looked fascinated, furious. Yes. In pain, yes. But beneath it, something darker and more intimate moved behind his eyes. You keep doing that, he said. What? Touching me like you're not afraid of what I am. Elena's hands were still on his shoulders. She pulled them back. I'm afraid of plenty, not me. She wanted to deny it. Couldn't. Not completely. The truth was worse. Luca frightened her, but not in the way he should have. Not like Voss. Not like the unknown number. Not like the photograph of her mother's grave. Luca frightened her because when he looked at her, she felt seen in places she had spent years hiding. Dominic cleared his throat. We need to move her. No, Luca said. Dominic's jaw tightened. Boss, no one moves her without her consent. Elena stared at him. The words were quiet, ragged, but absolute. Luca turned his head slightly toward Dominic. Find Beth. Bring her here. Secure every exit. And get me the name of the man outside her apartment. Already moving. Sophia. The woman stepped into the doorway. Here, kill the building cameras. Elena stiffened. No. Luca's eyes returned to her. No killing hospital cameras. I said kill, not destroy. I know what you meant. His mouth curved faintly despite the pain. Do you? I work in a hospital. Cameras protect patients. Tonight they help Voss track you. Elena felt her. Sophia looked impatient. I can loop the hall feed, not erase it. Luca watched Elena, waiting, not commanding, waiting. That unsettled her more than dominance would have. Finally, Elena nodded once. Loop only this hallway. Don't touch patient rooms. Don't touch medication storage. Don't compromise staff safety. Sophia looked at Luca. Luca looked at Sophia. Do what she said. Sophia's face tightened, but she left. Elena stared at him. Why are they listening to me? Because I am. The answer landed too softly, too heavily. Elena stepped away from the bed, needing distance. You need rest. I need the truth. You just came out of surgery. I've survived worse. Congratulations. That doesn't make you medically special. For a moment, something almost human passed over Luca's face. Amusement. Then pain pulled it away. Elena. She hated the way her name sounded in his voice. Like a secret he already knew the shape of. What? Dominic told you. It was not a question. Her body went still. About my father? Luca closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not the Mafia boss. Not the wounded man. Something older. A boy in a winter coat, holding his brother's hand beside a black car. I didn't know who you were when they brought me in, he said. Elena folded her arms. That's supposed to comfort me? No. Good. Because it doesn't. His gaze held hers. I knew your father. The room seemed to hush around that sentence. Elena's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Was he really your most trusted man? Luca was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, No. Her chest tightened. Dominic turned slightly from the doorway. Luca's eyes never left hers. He was my only trusted man. Elena felt something crack inside her. A small sound escaped her. Not a sob. Not quite. She caught it before it became one. My mother told me he left. He did, Luca said. But not by choice. She gripped the back of a chair. Then tell me. Luca's jaw tightened as pain moved through him, but the pain in his eyes had nothing to do with the wounds in his body. Your father found out Voss was working with my uncle to dismantle the Moretti family from the inside. Police raids, missing evidence, false warrants, assassinations disguised as arrests. Thomas had proof. What proof? A ledger, names, payments, dates. Every officer, judge, contractor, and politician Voss owned. Elena's mind flashed to the locked metal box beneath her mother's bed. Her pulse jumped. What happened to it? Luca's gaze sharpened on her face. You know, I don't. But even as she said it, she remembered her mother kneeling beside the bed at 2 a.m, whispering into the phone. I still have it, but not for you. Elena had been 7, half asleep. She thought her mother was talking about money. Luca read the memory on her face. His voice lowered. Your mother had it. Elena backed away from the bed. No. Elena. No. Her breath shook. My mother was a waitress. She worked breakfast shifts and came home smelling like coffee. She made soup when I was sick. She sang badly when she was tired. She was not hiding Mafia ledgers. She was hiding you. The words hit with brutal precision. Elena went silent. Luca's face softened by the smallest degree. Thomas knew he was marked. He took the ledger to your mother because no one would search a woman Voss believed was beneath notice. Then he came to me. And? Luca's eyes darkened. And I failed him. The confession was so quiet that Elena almost wished he had yelled. He was taken that night, Luca continued, by Voss's men. I found him too late. Elena's grip on the chair tightened until her fingers hurt. How did he die? Luca did not answer. Her eyes burned. How did he die? Dominic turned toward the window. Luca's voice dropped. Protecting your name. Elena stopped breathing. They wanted to know where your mother had gone, where the ledger was, whether there was a child. Luca swallowed, pain twisting across his face. He gave them nothing. The room blurred. Elena saw her mother's hands braiding her hair before school, saw the locked metal box, saw her mother crying silently over a photograph Elena was never allowed to see, saw the older man with the scar at their door, Dominic, coming to tell her mother Thomas was gone. All this time, Elena had thought her father left because life with them was too small, too poor, too much trouble. But he had died refusing to say her name. Something broke open in her chest. She turned away, pressing a fist against her mouth. Luca's voice followed her, rough and low. I looked for you. Elena spoon back. What? After Thomas died, your mother disappeared. Dominic traced her to 3 cities. Then nothing. She was good. Better than any of us expected. Elena's eyes filled despite every effort to stop it. My mother spent her whole life looking over her shoulder because of you. Because of me, Luca said. No defense. No excuse. That made her angrier. Don't do that. His brow tightened. Do what? Act like honesty makes it noble. Luca accepted the blow in silence. Good. She wanted him to feel it. My mother died tired, Elena said, voice trembling. She died with bills stacked on the table and fear in her bones, and I thought it was because the world was hard, but it was because of this. Because of men like you and Voss and whatever war you decided mattered more than ordinary lives. Luca's eyes held hers. Yes, the single word stole the air from her. Elena wanted denial, explanation, some cold Mafia arrogance she could hate cleanly. Instead, he gave her agreement, and worse than that, grief. Dominic stepped forward. Elena, your father chose. Don't. She turned on him. Do not turn his death into loyalty. Dominic went still. Elena looked back at Luca. Did he choose you over us? No, Luca said immediately. Then what did he choose? You. Her tears came then. Silent, furious, unwanted. Luca watched them, as if each one cut him deeper than the wounds Voss had left. He knew if Voss got the ledger and found out he had a daughter, you would become leverage. He chose to keep you unknown, even from me. Then why am I known now? Luca's expression hardened. Because someone found the thread your mother spent her life hiding. Another buzz cut through the room. Sophia appeared in the doorway. We found Beth. Elena wiped her face fast. Where is she? Locked in a supply room on Surgical 2. Scared but alive. Relief nearly folded Elena in half. Luca's eyes closed briefly, as if some invisible blade had moved away from her throat. Sophia continued, but we have another problem. Dominic looked at her. What? The man outside Elena's apartment is gone. He left something taped under her mailbox. Elena's stomach turned. Sophia held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small silver key. Elena recognized it instantly. Her mother's old storage key. The one Elena had kept in a jewelry box for years without knowing what it opened. Her voice went thin. How did they get that? Sophia's expression was grim. They didn't. Elena looked at her. It was waiting for you, Sophia said. Like someone wanted you to know where to look. Luca stared at the key. Every line of his body went still. Dominic whispered, The ledger. Elena looked between them. No. My mother would have told me. Luca's voice was low. Maybe she tried. The words pulled a memory from the dark. Her mother on the last night before the hospital. Thin, pale, breathing hard. Elena, she had whispered, gripping her hand. There's a place where I kept the truth. Elena had thought she meant the old photo box. Memories, letters, grief. She had been too tired, too heartbroken, too afraid of losing her to ask. Now the sentence returned with teeth. There's a place where I kept the truth. Elena sank into the chair beside Luca's bed. For a moment, no one spoke. Rain struck the window. Machines beeped. Somewhere beyond the locked floor, men were moving through the hospital because Elena Carter had become something she never wanted to be. Important. Luca watched her carefully, not possessively now, not like a Mafia boss guarding an asset, like a man afraid she might shatter and knowing he had helped build the hammer. Elena, he said quietly. She looked at him. You don't have to do anything tonight. She almost laughed. You really think that's true? His eyes darkened. No. There it was again. That brutal honesty. Elena hated it, trusted it, feared it. Luca turned his gaze to Dominic. Where is the storage unit? Sophia answered instead. South Loop, old private facility, under Margaret Carter's maiden name. Elena looked at her sharply. How do you know that? Sophia held up her phone. Because your mother was very good at hiding from dangerous men. Not from me. Elena's expression hardened. Luca saw it immediately. Sophia. What? Speak with respect. Sophia's jaw tightened. I'm trying to keep her alive. Then remember why. The room went silent. Elena looked at Luca. What does that mean? Luca held her gaze. The answer came soft. Because Thomas Carter saved my life with his last breath. And because your mother protected the one thing that could have burned Voss to the ground. Elena's voice barely rose above the machines. What thing? Luca looked at the key. The ledger was never just a list of crimes. Dominic's face darkened. Luca continued. It contained proof of who ordered Matteo's disappearance. His younger brother. The ghost in the photograph. The reason Luca had gone to the alley. Elena's heart pounded. And you think my mother hid it? I think your mother hid the only truth Voss couldn't allow to survive. Elena stared at the silver key through the plastic bag. Her old life sat on one side of the room. Rent notices, exhaustion, lonely showers, stale coffee, pretending she was fine. On the other side was this. Blood, secrets, bodyguards, a wounded Mafia boss looking at her like she had become the center of a war. She wanted to choose the first life, even broken. It was hers. But then, her phone buzzed again. No unknown number this time. A video call. Beth. Elena answered instantly. Beth? Beth's terrified face filled the screen. She was crying, hidden somewhere dark, probably still inside the supply room. Elena, she whispered. Don't come looking for me. What? They said they found you? Beth shook her head hard. Behind her, a shadow moved. Elena's blood froze. Beth's voice cracked. They lied. Then the screen shifted. A man stepped into view behind Beth. He smiled at Elena. It was the younger officer from the emergency room, the one who had hesitated when Voss ordered her removed. His gun was pressed against Beth's side. Hello, Nurse Carter, he said gently. Bring the key. Elena forgot how to breathe. For one impossible second, the screen in her hand became the whole world. Beth's tear-streaked face. The dark supply room behind her. The younger officer's gun pressed so calmly into her side that it looked almost casual, like violence was just another part of his uniform. Bring the key, he repeated. Elena's fingers tightened around the phone. Luca moved. Not much. His body was too wounded, too restrained by tubes and stitches and the brutal mercy of surgery. But the shift was enough to make every monitor beside him jump. Dominic stepped closer. Boss. Luca ignored him. His eyes were locked on the screen. Elena? Beth whispered, voice breaking. Don't. The officer pressed the gun harder against her ribs. Beth gasped. Elena's blood turned to ice. Stop, Elena said. Stop. I'll bring it. No, Luca raspith. She turned on him. This is not your decision. His face was pale, his jaw clenched against pain, but his eyes burned with a terrifying clarity. It is a trap. I know. They will take you. They already took Beth. The officer smiled through the phone. Listen to the nurse, Moretti. She understands leverage better than you right now. Luca's expression changed. Not anger. Something colder. Something ancient. You're wearing a badge, Luca said, voice low and ruined. But you smell like a man who rents his courage. The officer's smile twitched. Elena felt the room shift around Luca's words. Even half dead, he knew exactly where to cut. You should be careful, the officer said. I'm the one holding the gun. No, Luca whispered. You're the one holding the hostage because you know you can't hold the room. The officer's eyes hardened. Beth cried softly. Elena stepped between Luca and the screen, as if her body could stop the war inside his voice. Enough, she said. Tell me where. The officer's gaze returned to her, and his face softened into something almost kind. That frightened her more. South Service exit. 5 minutes. Alone. Bring the key in your hand where I can see it. That's impossible. The floor is locked down. Then unlock it. If I don't? The officer tilted his head toward Beth. Elena's stomach clenched. Don't make me perform proof, he said gently. The call ended. Silence fell so hard it felt physical. Then everything exploded. Dominic turned toward the guards. Seal the stairwells. Find that call location. Sophia, trace the signal. Now. Sophia was already typing, her face sharp with focus. It bounced through the hospital Wi-Fi for 3 seconds, then cut. He's inside. Elena stared at the dead screen. Inside. Beth was somewhere in the hospital, close enough to hear the rain, close enough to die because Elena had touched the wrong man's sleeve. She moved toward the door. Dominic blocked her. No. Elena looked up at him. Move. You walk out there alone. They take you and kill her anyway. You don't know that. I know men who need bargaining chips do not give them back. Elena scoffed at his chest. He didn't move. Move, Elena, Luca said. His voice was quieter than Dominic's. Somehow it stopped her faster. She turned. He was trying to sit up again, one hand gripping the bed rail so hard his knuckles went white. Pain shone across his face in a cold sweat. Elena rushed back despite herself. Lie down. No, you'll tear something open. Then stitch me later. You are urgent? Elena. The way he said her name made the insult die in her throat. He looked at Dominic. Give her the fake. Dominic froze. Sophia looked up from the laptop. Elena stared between them. The fake what? Luca's breath hitched, but he forced the words through. Key. Dominic's face darkened. You are not stable enough for this. I didn't ask. The doctor will sedate you. Luca's eyes sharpened. Then the doctor will learn disappointment. Elena stepped closer to the bed. What fake key? Luca's gaze returned to her. There are rules in my world, he said. One of them is never let the only key be the only key. Sophia reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and removed a small pouch. Inside were 3 silver keys, each almost identical to the one in the evidence bag. Elena's mouth parted. You copied my mother's key? Sophia looked at her. We copied the shape from the photo before you finished breathing. Elena's anger flared. That key might be the only thing my mother left me that matters. No, Luca said softly. She looked at him. His eyes held hers. You are. The words struck too deep, too suddenly. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Elena hated how badly she wanted to believe that he meant it in a way that was not tactical, not mafia, not war, just human. Then Beth's terrified face flashed in her mind. Give me the fake, Elena said. Dominic's expression hardened. Absolutely not. Luca's voice cut through the room. Give it to her. Dominic looked at him with a fury that came from loyalty, not defiance. You can barely breathe. Good, Luca said. Then everyone will believe I am too weak to be dangerous. Elena understood then. A chill ran through her. No, Luca's eyes never left Dominic. She walks. We follow invisible. No, Elena repeated. Now Luca looked at her. You want me to use myself as bait, she said. I want to keep Beth alive. And me? His face changed. Pain passed through it, but not from his wounds. You, he said quietly. I want nowhere near this. But Voss made that choice impossible before I woke up. That doesn't answer me. Luca's gaze burned into hers. If they touch you, I will burn every badge, every building, every name that protected them until this city remembers what fear was made for. The room went still. Elena's pulse slammed beneath her skin. It was a terrible answer. A beautiful one. A monstrous promise wrapped around her name. And that was exactly why she could not let herself lean into it. I don't need a city burned for me, she said. No, Luca whispered. You need one honest enough not to hunt you for saving a life. Elena looked away first, because he was right, and because she could not afford for him to be. Sophia placed the fake key in Elena's palm. It was cold, too light, a lie shaped like survival. Dominic stepped beside her, voice low. You walk to the South Service exit. Slowly. Hold the key visible. Do not look for us. Do not stop. Do not let them pull you into a blind corner. If they try, drop to the floor. Elena swallowed. Why? So we have a clean shot. Her blood went cold. No shooting near Beth. If they threaten you, no shooting, unless Beth is clear. Dominic's jaw tightened. Luca spoke before he could argue. You heard her. Dominic stared at Luca. You are giving her command decisions now? Luca's eyes narrowed. I am recognizing she has better instincts than half the men I pay. Sophia made a small sound that might have been laughter if the room were not so dangerous. Elena looked down at Luca. He looked exhausted now, the brief surge of control draining from him, leaving the wounded man beneath the black myth. Sweat dampened his temple. His breathing was too shallow. You should rest, she said. I will, when you come back. She wanted to say, don't make promises sound like orders. Instead, she said, you still owe me the truth about my father. His eyes softened in that impossible, barely visible way. I know. And Matteo. At that name, something flickered through him. Grief. Rage. Hope so violent it looked almost like fear. Yes, he said. Matteo, too. Elena turned before the look could pull her closer. The hallway outside Luca's room had become a shadowed battlefield disguised as a hospital corridor. The overhead lights were dimmed from the power disruption. Emergency strips glowed along the baseboards. Rain tapped the high windows in nervous patterns. Sophia walked 10 steps behind her, dressed now in a white hospital coat stolen from somewhere, her pistol hidden but not absent. Dominic vanished down a side corridor with 2 men who moved like ghosts. Elena walked alone. At least, that was what the cameras would show. Her shoes squeaked softly on the polished floor. Every sound felt too loud. Every door looked like a mouth. She passed a darkened nurse's station, an empty wheelchair, a cart of folded linens. The ordinary details made the terror worse. Hospitals were supposed to hold pain, yes, but not this kind. Not men with guns hiding behind supply closets. Not corrupt officers using nurses as bait. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Too slow. Elena forced herself not to look around. She typed with one thumb. I'm coming. The reply appeared instantly. Key visible. She lifted her hand. The fake key caught the cold hallway light. Another message came. Good girl. Elena stopped walking, just for half a second. Something inside her hardened. Fear was one thing. Humiliation was another. She thought of Voss reading her rent history in front of the trauma team, of the officer pressing a gun into Beth's side, of every man tonight who had mistaken gentleness for weakness. Then she resumed walking, Slower, steadier. By the time she reached the South Service corridor, her hands had stopped trembling. The door at the end had a narrow vertical window. Beyond it, emergency stairwell lights flickered yellow over concrete steps. Elena pushed through. The stairwell smelled like bleach and wet dust. "Close it," a voice said. She did. The click echoed. Beth stood 2 landings below, barefoot now, wrists tied in front of her with medical tubing, face streaked with tears. The younger officer stood behind her, gun at her ribs, but he was not alone. Marcus Voss waited on the landing beneath them, one hand resting on the railing. Grey suit immaculate, expression calm and almost disappointed. Elena's stomach dropped. "Deputy Commissioner," she said. Voss smiled. "Nurse Carter." The officer took the first few steps upward with Beth. "Key," he said. Elena lifted it. Beth shook her head frantically. "Elena, don't." Voss sighed. "Elizabeth, please. You've been very emotional." Elena looked at him. "Let her go. Soon." "Now." Voss's smile thinned. "You have your father's stubbornness." The words hit, but Elena refused to let them show. "You knew him. I knew many criminals. He worked for Luca. He died for Luca." Voss tilted his head. "There's a difference." Elena's grip tightened around the fake key. "Did you kill him?" The stairwell went very quiet. Voss looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "No." Elena almost believed him. "Almost. I ordered it," he said. Beth made a small, terrified sound. Elena's lungs locked. Voss watched her reaction with careful interest, like a scientist observing pain under glass. "Your father was a problem," he continued. "Brave, loyal, stupid. Men like Thomas always think silence is noble. It isn't. It's just inconvenient." Elena felt something inside her go still. Not numb. Still. A terrible calm entering the place where panic had been. "You tortured him," she said. Voss's eyes sharpened slightly. He made choices. "Did he say my name?" The question came out before she could stop it. Voss studied her. Then his smile faded. "No." The word nearly broke her. Because Luca had told the truth. Her father had died protecting her name. Voss took one step upward. "Give me the key, Elena." "Why?" "Because whatever your mother hid does not belong to you. It belonged to my father. It belonged to a war that should have ended 20 years ago. Then why are you still afraid of it?" For the first time, Voss's face changed. Only a flash. But Elena saw it. So did Beth. So did the officer, whose gun shifted slightly as his confidence wavered. Voss recovered quickly. "I'm not afraid of ghosts." "No," Elena said. "You're afraid of paperwork." A sound moved above them. Tiny. Metal against concrete. Voss's eyes lifted. Too late. The stairwell lights went out. Beth screamed. A body slammed into the wall. Gunfire cracked once, deafening in the concrete shaft. Elena dropped to the floor like Dominic had told her. Someone grabbed her from behind. Not hard. Protective. Sophia's voice hissed in her ear. "Stay down." Emergency red lights flashed on. The world became fragments. Beth falling to her knees. The younger officer pinned against the railing by Dominic. His gun kicked across the landing. Luca's men moving from above and below. Silent and brutal. Voss backing down the steps. No longer smiling. Elena saw him reach inside his jacket. Sophia. Sophia fired. Not at Voss. At the pipe above him. Steam burst violently into the stairwell, white and scalding, forcing Voss to recoil behind the lower door. Dominic moved toward Beth. Elena scrambled to her friend. Beth. Beth collapsed into her arms, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." No, you're okay." Elena pulled at the tubing around her wrists. "You're okay." A door slammed below. Dominic looks down through the steam. Voss is gone. Sophia swore under her breath. The younger officer groaned against the stairs, blood at his mouth. Dominic's knee pressed into his back. Elena looked at him. He looked so young, so frightened now that the gun was gone. "Why?" she asked. His eyes flicked to Voss's escape route, then back to her. "He has my brother," the officer whispered. Dominic's hand tightened at the back of his neck. Elena went still. "What did you say?" The officer swallowed, voice cracking. "Voss has my brother. He said if I didn't help, he'd bury him." Luca's men exchanged glances. Sophia's expression changed first, sharp disbelief becoming something else. Dominic lowered his voice. "What is your brother's name?" The officer shut his eyes. "Matthew." Elena's heart stopped. No one moved. Even the steam seemed to hang still around them. Dominic's face went ashen. Sophia whispered, "No." Elena looked between them, dread unfolding slowly. Matthew, Matteo, Americanized, hidden in plain sight. A ghost renamed until he became another man's hostage. The officer opened his eyes, confused by their reaction. "He's not my real brother," he whispered. "My parents took him in when I was a kid. He doesn't remember much from before. Voss helped with the adoption records, said he was protecting him." Dominic stepped back as if struck. Elena felt the truth rearrange itself again. Not dead, not a ghost, not just bait. Matteo Moretti had been alive all this time, and Marcus Voss had kept him close enough to use. Sophia turned toward Elena, face pale beneath her composure. "Luca can't hear this from anyone else." Elena looked down at the fake key in her hand, then at Beth, shaking in her arms, then at the officer who had helped threaten them because Voss had built a cage around his family too. The war was no longer a shadow from the past. It was breathing in the stairwell. Dominic's phone rang. He answered, listened for 3 seconds, and went completely still. "What?" Sophia demanded. Dominic's eyes moved to Elena, then to the stairwell door. His voice was low. Luca's room was breached during the blackout. Elena stood too fast. Beth grabbed her wrist. "Elena." Dominic was already running. Elena followed. They burst back onto the critical care floor into chaos. Alarms flashed silently. A guard lay unconscious near the nurse's station. The hallway camera hung dark from the ceiling. Sophia shouted orders behind her, but Elena heard nothing except the pounding of her own heart. Luca's room door was open. The bed was empty. Blood stained the white sheets where he had ripped out an IV. Elena stepped inside, horror closing around her throat. On the pillow lay her real silver key. Beside it, written in Luca's blood on a torn piece of medical gauze, were 4 words. "I'm going for Matteo." Elena stared at the blood-written words until they blurred. "I'm going for Matteo." For a second, she could not move. Her mind refused to accept the physical impossibility of it. Luca Moretti had been opened on an operating table less than 2 hours ago. He had tubes in his veins, stitches holding his body together, blood loss still threatening to drag him back into death. He could barely sit up without machines screaming, and yet his bed was empty. His IV had been torn out. His blood marked the sheet, the floor, the gauze, and the real key was gone from her world and somehow back on his pillow, like a confession, like an apology, like a goodbye. "No," Elena whispered. Dominic entered behind her, took one look at the bed, and went dangerously still. Sophia swore under her breath. Beth stood frozen in the doorway, one hand over her mouth, eyes still red from crying. Elena picked up the real key with trembling fingers. It was warm, not from the room, from him. "He shouldn't be able to walk," she said. Dominic looked at the blood on the floor. "He can't. Then where is he?" Sophia was already moving to the broken camera near the ceiling. "He didn't go alone." Dominic turned sharply. "Who?" Sophia ripped open the maintenance panel beneath the nurse's station and checked the security feed from her tablet. Someone looped the hallway footage from the inside. I thought you looped it. Not this section. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Elena looked between them. What does that mean? Sophia's face darkened. It means someone on this floor helped take him. The words hit the room like a gunshot. Dominic's gaze swept over the hallway, over the unconscious guard, over every closed door, every shadow, every person who had been allowed too close. Lock the building, he ordered. Sophia gave a bitter laugh. Voss already did that for us. Police scanners are... Beth's voice shook. Real police or Voss's police? No one answered, because there was no longer a difference Elena could trust. Dominic stepped toward the door. Sophia, find the vehicle. He can't get far. He doesn't need to, Elena said. They turned to her. Her hand closed around the real key. He's not going after Matteo first. Dominic's eyes narrowed. What? He left me the real key. He wrote Matteo's name because he knew we'd chase that. But Luca wouldn't run blind after surgery. Not if the ledger is the reason Voss is doing all this. Sophia studied her with new attention. Elena's heartbeat quickened as the pieces connected in her mind. The storage unit, she said. That's where he's going. Dominic shook his head. Luca would not leave you behind to go there. He would if he thought taking the danger away from me was the only way to protect me. The room went quiet, because they all knew she was right. That was the terrible thing Elena had already learned about Luca Moretti. He did not give up control. He transferred risk onto himself and called it protection. Dominic reached into his coat. Then we move now. Elena stepped forward. I'm coming. No. Yes. Elena, this is no longer a hospital problem. It was never a hospital problem, she snapped. It became mine the moment Voss put Beth on a video call with a gun against her ribs. Beth touched her arm. Elena. Elena turned to her, and the fury inside her softened for only a second. You almost died because of a secret my mother kept alive. I'm not hiding in another room while everyone bleeds around me. Dominic's jaw flexed. You are not trained for this. No, Elena said. I'm trained to keep dying people alive. And right now, Luca Moretti is the dying person making the worst possible medical decision in Chicago. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Sophia said, She's not wrong. Dominic gave her a lethal look. Sophia shrugged. He's bleeding out somewhere. If we find him and he crashes, you want me doing chest compressions? I shoot people for a living. Beth let out something between a sob and a laugh. Dominic looked back at Elena. You stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. If bullets start flying, you go down and stay down. Elena lifted the key. And if Luca collapses? Dominic's expression did not change, but his voice did. Then you bring him back. They moved through the hospital like the building had become enemy territory. The power still flickered in sections, leaving hallways half-lit and haunted. Nurses hid behind locked medication rooms. Patients cried behind curtains. Somewhere below, alarms echoed without rhythm. Outside, red and blue police lights bled through rain-streaked windows, making the walls flash like the inside of a living wound. At the service elevator, Sophia forced open the panel and hot-wired the controls while Dominic spoke into a hidden earpiece. North stairwell compromised. Use west exit. No uniforms unless I confirm them. Elena stood beside Beth, trying to make her friend leave. Beth refused. I'm not going back to a supply room, Beth said, voice still shaky but firm. And I'm not letting you vanish with Mafia people without one normal witness. Sophia glanced over. Normal is generous. Beth glared at her. The elevator doors opened. Inside stood Dr. Calloway. Everyone froze. His face was pale. His white coat was damp with sweat. He raised both hands immediately when Dominic's gun appeared beneath his coat. Don't, Calloway said. I'm not with Voss. Dominic stepped in front of Elena. Then why are you here? Calloway swallowed hard. Because I saw who took Moretti. Elena's blood went cold. Who? Calloway's eyes flicked toward her. It was Harrow. The name punched through Elena's chest. Dr. Harrow, the surgeon who had saved Luca's life, the man who had called her into the surgical wing because Luca responded to her voice. "No," she said. Calloway's face tightened. "I saw him leave the restricted hall with 2 men in surgical masks. Moretti was in a wheelchair, barely conscious. I thought they were moving him for imaging, until I saw Harrow take off his badge and throw it in the trash." Dominic's voice was deadly calm. "Why didn't you stop them?" Calloway looked at him, as if the answer should have been obvious. "Because one of the men had a gun under his gown." Elena stepped into the elevator. "Where did they go?" "Basement loading corridor." Sophia hit the button so hard it cracked. As the doors closed, Calloway looked at Elena. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Elena did not answer. She did not have room for his guilt. Not now. The elevator dropped. Every floor passed with a soft, mechanical sound that felt too calm for the war waiting below. Elena stared at her reflection in the metal wall, blue scrubs stained with blood, hair falling loose, face pale but no longer soft in the way it had been that morning. That morning she had been a tired nurse worried about rent. Now she was holding a key her mother had hidden for 20 years while descending into the basement with Luca Moretti's oldest soldier, and a woman who could loop hospital cameras faster than most people unlocked their phones. Her old life felt very far away. The elevator stopped. The doors opened to darkness. The basement loading corridor smelled of wet concrete, gasoline, and old disinfectant. Emergency lights pulsed red along the ceiling. Somewhere ahead, a truck engine idled. Dominic raised one hand. Everyone stopped. Voices echoed from beyond the laundry carts. A man spoke first. "Move him. Voss wants him breathing until he opens the unit." Then another voice. Cold, controlled, weak, but unmistakable. "Tell Voss he still sends children to do men's work." "Luca." Elena's heart lurched. Dominic's eyes cut to hers. "Stai." She understood the look. She ignored it. Slowly they moved between stacks of clean linens and metal shelving. Through the narrow gap, Elena saw them. Dr. Harrow stood near a black ambulance with its rear doors open, surgical mask hanging loose around his neck. 2 armed men in fake hospital gowns flanked him, and between them, Luca sat slumped in a wheelchair, wrists strapped to the armrests with restraints. His hospital gown was open at the shoulder. Bandages wrapped his torso, already bleeding through. His skin was almost grey, but his head was lifted. His eyes were on Harrow, alive, furious, unbroken. Harrow crouched in front of him. "You should have let yourself die in surgery." Luca's mouth curved faintly. "You did poor work." Harrow hit him. Elena's hand flew to her mouth to stop a sound from escaping. Luca's head turned with the blow, but he did not groan. The monitor attached to the portable 4-pole beeped wildly. Harrow grabbed Luca by the jaw. "Voss should have let me finish your father properly years ago." Dominic went rigid beside Elena. Luca's eyes sharpened. "My father died quickly," Luca said. Harrow smiled. "No, he didn't." The corridor went colder, even from where she hid. Elena saw Luca absorb the words. Not as a man surprised by cruelty, as a son discovering a deeper room beneath an old nightmare. Harrow leaned closer. I watched him beg for Matteo. Luca's whole body strained against the restraints. The men holding him stepped back instinctively. Harrow's smile widened. "There he is." Dominic's hand tightened around his gun. Sophia silently raised hers. Elena's pulsehammer. Then Harrow looked toward the ambulance. "Bring the nurse out." Elena froze. A side door opened. Beth gasped beside her, because the person they dragged forward was not Elena. It was a middle-aged woman in a hospital administrator's suit, trembling, face bruised, hands bound. Sister Maria, the head of patient advocacy. The woman who had hired Elena after her mother died. When Elena had nearly failed her final licensing renewal, because grief had made studying impossible. Elena's knees almost gave out. "Why does he have her?" Beth whispered. Calloway looked sick. "She's been at Street Catherine's for 30 years. Harrow pulled a phone from his pocket and turned the screen toward Luca. On it was a live video. A dim room. A man tied to a chair, older than Luca, but with the same dark eyes. Thinner, hollow-cheeked, a faded scar near his eyebrow. Elena knew before anyone said it. Matteo. Luca stopped breathing. For the first time since Elena had met him, the monster disappeared completely. Only the brother remained. Harrow watched him with pleasure. "Voss says you have 10 minutes to bring the key to the South Loop unit," Harrow said. "The real key. The nurse's key. Or your brother dies knowing you stopped looking." Luca stared at the screen. His voice came out raw. "Matteo." The man on the video lifted his head slightly. His eyes were unfocused, drugged, but he heard the voice. "Luca?" he whispered. The sound broke something in the room. Dominic's face collapsed for half a second before he forced it back into stone. Sophia looked away as if she could not bear to see it. Luca leaned forward against the restraints, blood spreading across his bandages. "I'm here," he said. Matteo's mouth trembled. "I waited." Luca closed his eyes. The pain that moved across his face was not physical anymore. It was 20 years of grief turning into guilt. Harrow ended the call. Luca looked up slowly. Every trace of softness vanished. "If he dies," Luca said, voice almost gentle, "you will envy men who were buried whole." Harrow stood. "Then open the storage unit." He turned. "Find Nurse Carter." Dominic fired first. The corridor erupted. The gunshot cracked so loudly Elena felt it in her bones. Harrow dove behind the ambulance. Sophia shot out the overhead light, plunging the far side of the corridor into red emergency flashes. One armed man fell. The other grabbed the administrator and dragged her backward as a shield. Beth screamed. Calloway pulled her down behind a laundry cart. Dominic moved like violence given human shape, fast and precise, firing only when he had space. Sophia crossed the corridor low, dragging Elena behind concrete support pillars. "Stay down," Sophia shouted. But Elena saw Luca. The wheelchair had tipped during the chaos. He lay half on the floor, still restrained to one armrest, blood spreading beneath him. His face was turned toward the concrete, his breathing shallow. No one could reach him. A bullet struck the metal cart near Elena, showering sparks. Sophia grabbed her. "Do not move. He's bleeding. Everyone is bleeding. He's my patient." Sophia looked at her like she was insane. Maybe she was. Elena crawled. The floor was wet and cold beneath her palms. Gunfire roared above her. Someone shouted. The ambulance engine screamed as the driver tried to reverse. Dominic slammed into one of Harrow's men near the rear door, both of them crashing into the side panel. Elena reached Luca. His eyes opened when her hand touched his cheek. "Elena, don't talk. You came. You keep making medically stupid choices." His mouth moved faintly. "You missed me. Bleeding out is not flirting. Even then, God help her, even then." He almost smiled. She cut the restraint with a surgical trauma shear Calloway had shoved into her hand without her noticing. Luca's wrist came free, but his strength failed the moment he tried to push up. Elena pressed both hands against the soaked bandage. "Pressure," she snapped. "Luca, I need you to hold pressure." His hand covered hers. Warm, blood-slick, weak. But there, a shadow moved behind her. Elena looked up. Harrow stood over them with a gun. "Move away from him," he said. The chaos seemed to narrow into one silent point. Elena stayed where she was. Harrow's face twisted. "Do you have any idea what he is?" "Yes," Elena said, voice shaking but clear. "A man who needs pressure on a wound." Harrow laughed once. "You really are Thomas Carter's daughter." Luca's eyes darkened. Don't say her father's name. Harrow looked at him. Why, Thomas was loyal too. Look where it got him. Elena's hands tightened over Luca's wound. You killed him? No, Harrow said. Voss ordered it. He smiled. I made sure it lasted. Luca moved with impossible speed. 1 second he was half dead beneath Elena's hands. The next, he seized Harrow's wrist and dragged him down. The gun went off. The bullet shattered a pipe above them. Water burst across the corridor, raining down hard and cold. Harrow slammed an elbow into Luca's ribs. Luca's body arched in pain, stitches tearing, but his grip did not loosen. Elena grabbed the gun with both hands. Harrow fought her. For a terrifying second, the barrel pointed at her chest. Then Sophia appeared behind him and struck him across the head with the butt of her pistol. Harrow collapsed. Luca released him and fell back. Breathing raggedly, Elena turned to Sophia. Thank you. Sophia looked at Luca's blood-soaked bandage. Thank me by keeping him alive, Dominic shouted from the ambulance. Voss is moving Matteo! Luca's eyes snapped open. Elena pressed him down. No, Elena, no, you cannot chase him like this. His eyes burned with helpless fury. My brother is alive. I know. He waited. I know. His voice broke in a way that made the whole world hurt. I left him there. Elena leaned closer, her hands still buried in his blood. No. Voss left him there. Harrow left him there. You were a boy who survived what powerful men built around you. Luca stared at her. For 1 second, under red emergency lights and broken pipes and gun smoke, he looked like he might believe her. Then a phone rang from Harrow's pocket. Sophia snatched it and answered on speaker. Marcus Voss's voice filled the corridor. Well, he said calmly, that sounded messy. Dominic went still. Luca's eyes turned black with hatred. Voss continued. I assume Harrow disappointed me. Sophia pressed the phone closer to Luca. Luca's voice was low. I'm coming for him. Voss sighed. Yes, you always were sentimental about family. That's why you lose them. Elena saw Luca's hand curl into a fist. Voss's voice softened. Hello, Elena. Her blood chilled. Luca's eyes cut to her. Voss chuckled. I know you're there. You Carter women have such inconvenient loyalty. Elena looked at the phone. My mother beat you for 20 years, she said. Silence. For the first time, Voss did not answer immediately. Then his voice returned, colder. Your mother hid scraps she didn't understand. No, Elena said. She hid something you're still afraid of. Another silence. Luca watched her with something like awe beneath the pain. Voss said, Bring me the real key, or I send Matteo back to Luca in pieces. Elena's stomach twisted. Dominic mouthed silently. Keep him talking. Elena gripped the phone. You don't have Matteo anymore. Voss laughed softly. Don't bluff, Nurse Carter. I'm not. Sophia's eyes sharpened. Elena kept going, following instinct now. You moved him when the hospital attack started. Too many people knew the storage unit. Too many moving pieces. You wouldn't risk keeping him somewhere connected to you. Voss went quiet. Elena's heart thundered. So you sent him to the one place no one would look, she said. Not a warehouse. Not a police safe house. Luca's gaze fixed on her. She remembered the photograph of her mother's grave. Fresh black roses. A threat. Oracle. Elena whispered. You put him near the dead. Dominic's eyes widened. Voss's voice came back like ice. You should have stayed a nurse. The call ended. Sophia was already typing. Cemetery properties. Voss family holdings. Old mausoleums. Private burial grounds. Dominic grabbed Harrow by the collar and lifted him halfway off the floor. Where is Matteo? Harrow smiled through blood. Dominic slammed him against the ambulance. Where? Harrow coughed. You're too late. Elena looked at the administrator. Sister Maria. still bound near the ambulance, shaking uncontrollably. She crawled to her and cut the bindings. Sister Maria, did they say anything? Anything about where they were taking him? The older woman trembled. I heard Voss on the phone. He said the brother was being moved under the Angel. Sofia froze. Dominic turned. The Angel? Elena asked. Luca answered, voice barely audible. Moretti family crypt. Elena looked at him. His face had gone white. My mother's grave, he whispered. For a moment, no one moved. Then the corridor erupted into motion again. Dominic barked orders. Sophia called in cars. Calloway and Beth rushed forward with emergency supplies. Elena focused on Luca because if she looked too far ahead, fear would swallow her. She packed gauze into the torn stitches, started a new IV, forced him to drink sips of water, checked his pupils, his pulse. You are not going, she said. Luca's eyes opened. You know I am. You'll D. Then, keep up. She stared at him, furious. He stared back, ruined and impossible. Matteo is buried alive in my family crypt, he said. If I stay here, I die anyway. The worst part was that Elena understood, not with logic, with blood. If someone had told her that her mother was alive, trapped beneath stone, waiting in the dark, no injury in the world would have kept Elena away. She looked at Beth. Beth was pale, shaking, but alive. Go, Beth whispered. Elena's throat tightened. Beth, go save his brother. The rain outside turned violent as they left the hospital through the basement loading exit. Dominic drove the first black SUV. Sophia rode beside him, weapons laid across her lap. Luca lay across the back seat with Elena beside him, her hands never leaving the bandage. 2 more vehicles followed behind them through the storm. Chicago blurred past in streaks of blue, red, and silver. Luca's face was turned toward the window. He looked like a man being driven into his own nightmare. Elena, he said quietly, I'm here. I need you to know something. No dramatic death confessions. His mouth curved faintly. Then pain erased it. If Matteo is alive, Voss kept him to control more than me. What do you mean? Luca looked at her. Matteo was the legal heir to everything my father built before the family became blood and shadow. Properties, trusts, accounts. If he signs them over under another identity, Voss can clean decades of money through him. Elena's stomach sank. So Matteo isn't just hostage. No, Luca said. He's the lock. And the ledger? The key to proving who made him one. Elena looked down at the silver key in her hand. The real one. Her mother's key. Her father's death. Luca's brother. All of it connected by one small piece of metal. The SUV turned through iron cemetery gates. Lightning cracked above the trees. The Moretti family crypt stood at the top of a hill beneath a stone angel with broken wings, rain pouring down its face like tears. Black cars lined the path below. Voss was already there. So were his men, and between the crypt doors, held upright by 2 armed officers, stood Matteo Moretti, alive, barely, his face lifted when the headlights hit him. Luca made a sound Elena would never forget. Not rage, not grief. A brother recognizing the part of himself he had mourned for 20 years. The SUV stopped. Dominic turned. We do this smart. Luca reached for the door. Elena grabbed his wrist. He looked at her. She shook her head once. Then she opened the door first. Rain hit her like ice. Every gun turned toward her. Voss stood beneath the broken angel, immaculate under a black umbrella. Elena Carter, he called through the storm. Still choosing the wrong devil? Elena walked forward, the silver key raised in her hand. No, she said. Behind her, Luca stepped out of the SUV, bleeding, pale, held up by nothing but pain and fury. Elena looked at Voss. I'm choosing the truth. Voss smiled. Then Matteo lifted his head and looked past her. At Luca, the brothers stared at each other across 20 years of lies. Matteo's lips trembled. Luca? Luca's face broke. Just once. Elena, he whispered. She turned slightly. His eyes stayed on his brother. Get ready to run. Before she could ask why, the crypt doors behind Matteo opened from the inside, and a woman stepped out. Olda, elegant, dressed in black. A woman Luca saw, and immediately stopped breathing. Dominic whispered a name like a prayer and a curse. Isabella. Elena looked from Dominic to Luca. Who is that? Luca's voice was hollow. My mother. For one impossible moment, even the storm seemed to pause. Luca Moretti stood in the rain with blood soaking through his bandages, his face pale, his body barely upright, and stared at the woman stepping out of the crypt as if death had opened its mouth and returned someone it had swallowed whole. Isabella Moretti, his mother, the woman whose grave had shaped half the darkness in him. The woman Luca had mourned before he was old enough to understand what grief would do to a boy who had no one left to hold him. She stood beneath the broken-winged angel in a black coat, silver threaded through her dark hair, her face elegant and almost unchanged except for time. Rain touched her shoulders. She did not flinch from it. Behind Elena, Dominic lowered his gun by 1 inch. Not because the danger was gone, because the past had just walked out of stone. Luca, Isabella said. Her voice was soft. That made it worse. Luca swayed. Elena's hand shot to his back, steadying him before anyone else could. His body was burning under her palm, feverish from trauma and blood loss. You know her? Elena whispered, though she already knew the answer. Luca's eyes did not leave the woman. She died, he said. Isabella's expression tightened. No. Marcus Voss called from beneath his umbrella. She survived. The words cut through the cemetery like a blade. Matteo stood between 2 armed officers near the crypt doors, weak and hollow-eyed. His gaze moved from Luca to Isabella, confusion and pain collapsing across his face. Mother? He whispered. Isabella looked at him, and something in her composure cracked, only slightly, but enough. Luca saw it. His jaw clenched, and Elena felt his body tense, as if pain itself had become irrelevant. You were alive, he said. Isabella took 1 step forward. Luca. No. His voice was low, but it carried through the storm. You were alive. Voss smiled. Elena looked at him then. He was enjoying this. Not the reunion, the destruction. He had arranged the living like weapons. Brother, mother, son, all pointed at Luca's heart. Elena's fear began to change shape. It did not leave. It sharpened. She stepped slightly in front of Luca. Not enough to block him. Enough to remind Voss she was there. Voss's smile shifted toward her. Brave little nurse. Elena lifted the silver key. Is this what you want? Every gun moved. Dominic's men reacted instantly, spreading behind the SUVs with weapons drawn. Sophia stepped to Elena's left, her pistol hidden low beneath her coat but ready. Beth had stayed at the hospital, safe under guard, but Elena still heard her voice in her mind. Go save his brother. Now Elena realized saving Matteo would not be enough. This entire family had been buried alive in different graves. Matteo in Voss's custody, Luca in guilt, Isabella in secrets. And Elena's mother had spent 20 years holding the shovel that could dig them out. Voss extended his hand. Give it to me. Elena did not move. Let Matteo go first. Voss sighed, almost disappointed. You're in no position to negotiate. She is, Luca said. The sound of his voice made everyone turn. He stood straighter now, though Elena could feel the terrible cost of it under her hand. Blood slid beneath the edge of his hospital gown and disappeared into the waistband of borrowed black pants someone had forced onto him before they left. He looked half dead, He also looked like every man in that cemetery belonged to him. Voss tilted his head. You can barely stand. Luca's mouth curved faintly. And yet you brought my mother, my brother, half your police dogs, and a graveyard to feel safe. For the first time, several of Voss's men shifted uneasily. Voss's eyes cooled. You mistake theater for fear. No, Luca said. I recognize desperation when it borrows a badge. Elena felt the sentence land. Voss's expression did not fully change, but something behind his eyes tightened. Isabella looked between them. Enough. Everyone went still. Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the kind of authority that came from being obeyed long before men forgot she was alive. Marcus, she said. This ends now. Voss looked at her, and his smile returned, thinner than before. That is not your decision anymore. It became mine, the day you used my sons against each other. Luca went rigid. Elena looked at Isabella. What does that mean? Isabella's eyes moved to her. For the first time, Elena felt the full weight of the woman's attention. Not cold, not kind, measuring. You are Thomas Carter's daughter. Elena's grip tightened on the key. Yes. A shadow crossed Isabella's face. Your mother was braver than any of us. The words struck Elena harder than she expected. Voss snapped. Don't romanticize a waitress who stole what she didn't understand. Elena turned toward him. She understood enough to keep it from you. The storm cracked open with thunder. Voss's jaw tightened. Luca's hand found Elena's wrist. Not holding her back, not controlling her, anchoring himself. Elena realized then that he was fading. His grip was weaker than before. His breathing had changed. Too shallow, too fast. He could intimidate the entire cemetery, but his body was betraying him. She leaned close without taking her eyes off Voss. You have minutes, she whispered. Luca's fingers tightened. Then use them. Those 3 words passed between them like a transfer of power, not from him to her, from her own fear into something stronger. Elena stepped forward. Dominic moved as if to stop her. Luca lifted one hand. Dominic froze. Elena walked into the space between guns with the silver key raised. Rain plastered her hair to her face. Her blue scrubs were streaked with Luca's blood. She looked nothing like the quiet nurse who had started the night afraid of rent notices and empty apartments. She looked like a woman who had run out of things to lose. Voss, she said, you wanted the key because you thought the ledger was still locked away. Voss watched her carefully. It is. No, Elena said. Sophia's eyes flicked toward her. Dominic went very still. Even Luca looked at her now. Elena pulled her phone from her pocket with her free hand. My mother didn't trust locks. She trusted nurses. Voss's expression changed, just for a fraction of a second. But Elena saw it. So did Luca. When she got sick, Elena continued, she gave boxes of papers to Sister Maria at Street Catherine's. She told me they were old medical documents and keepsakes. I never opened them because grief makes cowards of people in strange ways. Voss's face hardened. Elena looked at Luca. I didn't understand until tonight. Sister Maria, 30 years at Street Catherine's. Patient advocacy. The woman Harrow had dragged forward in the basement because Voss knew she mattered. Not just to Elena, to the ledger. Elena turned the phone screen toward Voss. A file transfer icon glowed there. Sophia had not been silent in the SUV because she was calm. She had been working, scanning, uploading, burning the past into servers Voss could not touch fast enough. Elena's voice rang across the cemetery. You were right about one thing. The ledger wasn't just paperwork. Voss's umbrella lowered slightly. Thunder rolled over the crypt. Elena continued. It was names, payments, murders, forged adoption records, property transfers, police bribes, offshore accounts, judges, officers, charity boards, Hospitals. Every clean hand you used to move dirty money. Voss's eyes moved to Sophia. Sophia smiled without warmth. Already uploaded, she said. Multiple dead drops. Timed releases. Federal journalists. Internal affairs. A few people who hate you more than they fear you. Voss's face lost color. You're bluffing. Elena shook her head. No. I'm my mother's daughter. The words came out steady, and for the first time, Elena felt them as inheritance rather than ache. Voss stared at her, and the mask began to crack. Not completely. Men like him did not shatter loudly. They calcified. You stupid girl, he said softly. Luca's voice cut through the rain. Careful. Voss looked at him. Luca stepped forward once, and nearly fell. Elena turned instantly, but he forced himself upright. His eyes were locked on Voss with lethal calm. You are speaking to the woman who just ended you. The cemetery went silent except for rain. Then, a phone rang. One of Voss's officers looked down. Then another. Then another. Screens lit up across the cemetery. Message. Calls. Alerts. Sophia's smile widened. There it is. Voss did not move. His own phone began ringing beneath his coat. He ignored it. Then the first police officer lowered his weapon. Voss turned toward him slowly. What are you doing? The officer's face had gone pale. Sir, raise your weapon. The officer did not. Another lowered his gun. Then another. The obedience that had protected Voss for years began breaking apart, one shaking hand at a time. Dominic stepped forward with Luca's men. Not firing, just advancing. The balance shifted. Elena felt it like pressure changing before a storm. Voss looked around and saw, perhaps for the first time in decades, that fear could move in the other direction. His gaze snapped to Matteo. Kill him. One of the men holding Matteo raised his gun. Luca shouted his brother's name. Elena moved before thought. She threw the silver key, not at Voss, at the gunman's face. The key struck his eye. He flinched. Matteo twisted free with the last desperate strength of a man who had survived cages. Dominic fired once. The gunman dropped. Sophia took out the second before he could turn. Chaos erupted. Voss bolted toward the crypt. Luca tried to follow and collapsed. Elena caught him badly, both of them almost going down in the mud. Luca. He gripped her arm. Matteo. Dominic reached Matteo first, cutting the restraints with brutal efficiency. Matteo fell against him, shaking, eyes fixed on Luca. Luca. Matteo breathed. Luca tried again to stand. Elena held him down with both hands. No. You will not die 10 feet from your brother because of pride. His eyes burned. You need blood, stitches, and 1 second of obedience. Even through the pain, Luca stared at her. Dominic half carried Matteo toward them. The brothers met in the rain beneath the broken angel. For a moment, no one else existed. Matteo fell to his knees beside Luca. His hand hovered over Luca's face, afraid to touch him. You're real, Matteo whispered. Luca's expression broke in a way Elena had only seen once before, when Isabella stepped out of the crypt. I thought you were dead. Matteo's mouth trembled. I thought you stopped looking. Luca closed his eyes as if the words physically entered him. No, he said, voice ruined. Never. Matteo leaned forward, and Luca pulled him in with what little strength he had left. The embrace was awkward, desperate, made nearly impossible by Luca's wounds and Matteo's weakness, but it held 20 years of grief inside it. Elena turned away because the intimacy of it felt sacred. Then she saw Voss. He had not run into the crypt. He had gone around it, to Isabella. He grabbed her from behind with a gun pressed beneath her jaw. Enough! Voss roared. The word ripped through the cemetery. Every gun rose again. Isabella remained very still. Voss's mask was gone now. His hair was wet, his face twisted, his expensive suit stained with mud. You think an upload wins this? He shouted. You think evidence matters when every court, every precinct, every judge in this city has eaten from my hand? Elena stood slowly. Luca saw Voss holding his mother. Something ancient and murderous moved through him. Dominic put a hand on his shoulder. Boss. Luca's voice was almost soundless. Move. No, move. Elena stepped in front of Luca. His eyes snapped to hers. No, he said. She looked at him. Yes? Then she turned toward Voss. He laughed when he saw her coming. You again. Elena stopped halfway between him and the others. Rain ran down her face like tears, but she was not crying. Not anymore. You ordered my father tortured, she said. Voss smiled through his rage. Your father chose pain over sense. You threatened my friend. She was useful. You used Matteo for 20 years. He was convenient. You buried Luca's mother alive in a lie. At that, Isabella's face changed. Voss's gun pressed harder beneath her jaw. Elena. Luca warned behind her, but Elena kept looking at Voss. And now you're still talking, she said quietly. Because you know once you stop, all that's left is the truth. Voss's eyes narrowed. Elena took one more step. You didn't keep Isabella alive because you needed her. Voss's mouth tightened. You kept her because she knew what you did to Matteo. She knew where the money moved. She knew which adoption records were forged. She was the living witness my mother's ledger needed. Isabella's eyes moved to Elena. Slowly, painfully. Voss's grip tightened. Shut up. Elena did not. You killed Luca's father. You took Matteo. You broke Isabella. You killed Thomas Carter. And then you built your career pretending to save Chicago from monsters. Voss trembled with rage. Elena's voice dropped. But the monster wore a badge. The cemetery lights flashed blue and red as more cars arrived at the gate. Not Voss's men this time. Black SUVs. News vans. Unmarked federal vehicles. Sophia's dead drops had worked faster than even she expected. Voss glanced toward the lights. That was all Isabella needed. The elegant, broken woman who had let men mistake survival for weakness moved suddenly. She drove her elbow back into Voss's ribs and dropped her weight. The gun fired into the sky. Luca surged forward with a roar, but Dominic caught him. Sophia fired. The bullet struck Voss's shoulder. He fell backward against the crypt wall, the gun skidding across wet stone. Dominic's men swarmed him. Voss fought like a man who had never imagined being touched without permission. It did not matter. They forced him to his knees beneath the angel. Rain poured over his face. The deputy commissioner of Chicago looked up and found Elena standing before him. Not Luca. Not Matteo. Not Isabella. Elena, the daughter of the man he tortured, the daughter of the woman he underestimated, the nurse he thought would obey because her rent was late and her life was small. Voss laughed, breathless and bleeding. You think this makes you powerful? Elena looked down at him. For the first time in her life, she did not feel poor. She did not feel invisible. She did not feel like a woman waiting for someone else to choose her. No, she said. It makes me done being afraid of men like you. Voss's eyes flicked past her to Luca. You let her stand in front of you now, Moretti? Luca's answer came from behind Elena, low and deadly. She was never behind me. Elena turned. Luca was on his feet, only because Matteo and Dominic held him upright. His face was bloodless. His bandages were ruined. But his eyes were on her with something that made her chest ache. Pride. Not possession. Pride. Federal agents moved through the cemetery. Officers who had lowered their weapons now raised their hands. Sophia handed over copied drives with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. Isabella stood near Matteo, touching his face as if relearning the shape of the sun stolen from her. And Elena walked back to Luca. He watched every step like he was afraid she might vanish. When she reached him, she did not ask permission. She pressed her hands against his chest. careful of the wounds, feeling the weak, furious beat beneath her palms. "You need a hospital." His mouth curved faintly. "I know one. You broke out of it. I was motivated. You are bleeding through everything." "You sound angry." "I'm angry." His eyes softened. "Good." Elena frowned. "Good? You're still here." The words found the softest, most dangerous part of her. She looked down at her hands on him. His blood, his heartbeat, her father's past, her mother's courage, all of it under her palms. "I'm not here because you told me to stay," she said. "I know. I'm not here because you protected me. I know. I'm here because I chose to be." Luca looked at her for a long moment, rain darkening his hair, pain carved into every line of his face. Then he said quietly, "That is the only reason I would ever want." Matteo swayed beside him, and Luca immediately turned toward his brother despite his own condition. Elena saw it then. Not the Mafia boss. Not the feared man. The protector who had been built from loss and sharpened by guilt. She saw what her father had seen. Not innocence. Never that. But loyalty so fierce it could become ruin. "Both of you," Elena said, pointing at Luca and Matteo. "Ambulance, now." Matteo blinked at her. Luca almost smiled. She gives orders. Matteo looked at his brother for the first time with something like fragile wonder. "You listen?" Luca's gaze moved to Elena. "Yes." Dominic made a sound suspiciously close to a laugh. Isabella approached Elena slowly. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other in the rain. Then, Isabella took Elena's hands. Her fingers were cold. "I owe your mother a debt I can never repay," Isabella said. Elena's throat tightened. She would have hated that sentence. Isabella's eyes shone. "Yes," she said softly. She would have. A strange warmth moved through Elena's chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But recognition. The women who had survived the men's war had not been side characters in it. They had been the reason truth survived long enough to strike back. As agents dragged Voss away in handcuffs, he looked back once, at Luca, at Matteo, at Isabella, then finally at Elena. His face was no longer calm, no longer polished, just afraid. Elena held his gaze until he looked away first. Only then did she turn back to Luca. He was fading fast now, his weight sagging against Dominic and Matteo. "Elena," he whispered, "I'm here." His eyes searched hers. This time the words sounded different. Not desperate like in the trauma bay, not commanding like in the hospital room. Almost tender. "Don't leave." Elena's breath caught. Around them, the cemetery flashed with emergency lights. Rain washed blood into the grass. The city that had feared Luca Moretti was beginning to learn whose names had truly haunted it. Elena stepped closer, sliding her hand into his. This time, she was the one who held on. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Luca's eyes closed. His hand tightened weakly around hers, and beneath her fingers his heartbeat answered. The city learned Marcus Voss's name before sunrise. Not as a hero. Not as a deputy commissioner. Not as the clean-faced man who stood behind podiums and promised safety to grieving families. By morning, every screen in Chicago showed the truth he had buried under badges, charity galas, forged warrants, stolen children, and blood. The ledger did what Elena's mother had protected it to do. It survived. Then it spoke. By noon, judges resigned before they were arrested. Officers who had once walked beside Voss suddenly forgot how to meet cameras. Reporters camped out side street. Catherine's shouting questions no one inside had the strength to answer, but Elena did not watch the news. She sat in a private critical care room with one hand wrapped around Luca Moretti's. He had survived the second surgery. Barely. Dr. Harrow's betrayal, the torn stitches, the cemetery, the blood loss. It had all dragged Luca so close to death that even the machines seemed cautious when they counted his heartbeat. But he stayed, not because the city feared him, not because his men guarded every hallway, not because rage kept him alive. Elena liked to believe he stayed, because every time the darkness pulled too hard, she leaned close and reminded him, "You told me not to leave, so don't you dare leave first." For 3 days, Luca drifted between sleep and pain. Sometimes he woke angry, sometimes silent. Sometimes he opened his eyes and searched the room until he found her. Only then would his breathing settle. Matteo recovered 2 rooms down, guarded less like a prisoner now, and more like a brother returned from the dead. He was thin, haunted, still flinching at sudden noises, but every afternoon Dominic wheeled him into Luca's room, and the 2 brothers sat in silence together. At first, they barely spoke. What could words do against 20 years? But one evening, Elena came in with medication and found Matteo asleep in the chair beside Luca's bed, his hand resting near Luca's on the blanket. Not touching. Almost. Luca saw her notice. His voice was rough. He used to fall asleep anywhere. Elena softened. He still does. Luca looked at his brother for a long time. I was supposed to protect him. Elena adjusted the IV line. You were a child. I became a monster, trying to make sure no one could take from me again. She looked at him then. The room was quiet except for rain tapping gently against the window. Not violent rain anymore. Just soft, grey city rain. And did it work? She asked. Luca's mouth moved faintly. No. Elena sat beside him. For once, he did not fill the silence with control. He let it breathe. After a while, he said, Your father saved me more than once. Elena looked down at their joined hands. I wish I knew him. He laughed more than you think. That surprised her. Luca's eyes stayed on the ceiling, but his voice softened with memory. He was calm when everyone else panicked. Annoyingly honest. Terrible at cards because his face gave away everything. Elena smiled through the ache in her chest. My mother said I got my stubbornness from her. You did. She glanced at him. Luca's mouth curved. But the dangerous kind came from him. For the first time in days, Elena laughed. Small, tired, real. Luca turned his head toward the sound like it was something he had not expected to deserve. A week later, Elena returned to her apartment. Not alone. Dominic stood in the hallway while Sophia checked every corner with professional suspicion. Beth came too, carrying coffee and pretending she wasn't crying when Elena unlocked the door. Nothing had changed. The crooked number 3B, the chipped table, the stack of overdue bills, her mother's photograph still beside the mug. But Elena had changed. She stood in the middle of the room and realized the apartment no longer felt like proof that she had failed. It felt like proof that she had endured. Sophia placed a cardboard box on the table. Sister Maria kept this safe, she said. Elena knew before opening it. Her mother's papers, letters, photographs, copies of the ledger, and one envelope with Elena's name written in handwriting. She had missed so badly her knees nearly weakened. She opened it alone that night. Her mother's letter was not long. It did not explain everything. Maybe no letter could, but it told Elena enough. That Thomas Carter had loved her before she was born. That he had died protecting her name. That her mother had spent years hiding not because Elena was weak, but because she was precious. That one day, if the truth found her, Elena should not let men with blood on their hands convince her that survival made her small. At the bottom, her mother had written one final line. You were never abandoned, my love. You were protected. Elena cried then. Not quietly, not carefully. She cried like someone finally allowed to grieve the right wound. When she returned to the hospital the next morning, Luca was awake. He looked at her face and said nothing, just lifted his hand. Elena took it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said, My mother forgave you more than I'm ready to. Luca's jaw tightened. I don't ask for forgiveness. I know. I don't deserve it. I know that too. His eyes darkened, but he accepted the words. That was one thing Elena had learned about Luca Moretti. He did not run from ugly truths. He simply stood inside them like punishment was a familiar room. Elena leaned closer, but I think she wanted me to live without carrying all of it. Luca's thumb moved slowly over her knuckles. And what do you want? The question settled between them. Once, Elena would have said peace. A paid bill. A quiet apartment. A life untouched by men like him. Now she knew peace was not always quiet. Sometimes peace was a heartbeat beneath your palm after a night of blood and thunder. Sometimes it was choosing without being forced. Sometimes it was looking at the most dangerous man in the city and seeing not safety, not innocence, but truth. I want time, she said. Luca held her chase. With me? Elena breathed in, then answered honestly. I don't know yet. Pain flickered across his face, but he nodded. Not pulling, not demanding, not turning hurt into power. Then I will wait. Elena studied him. Luca Moretti waits. For you, he said, voice low. Yes. Weeks passed. Voss's empire collapsed piece by piece. Matteo began remembering fragments from childhood. Isabella testified behind closed doors. Her elegance sharpened now into something unbreakable. Dominic became quieter, as if relief had exhausted him more than war ever had. Beth refused to leave Elena alone for too long, and developed the deeply irritating habit of calling Luca your terrifying boyfriend, whenever Elena looked too tired to argue. He is not my boyfriend, Elena said every time. Beth only smiled. Not yet. Elena went back to work, not because she had to prove anything, because she still knew how to hold pressure on wounds, because frightened patients still needed steady hands, because after everything, she refused to let violence steal the part of her that healed. But she no longer walked with her head down, and nobody at Street Catherine's ever spoke over Nurse Carter again. 1 month after the cemetery, Luca was discharged under loud medical protest and quiet Mafia satisfaction. Elena found him waiting outside the hospital entrance in a black coat, still pale, still healing, still too handsome in a way that made passing nurses forget their professionalism. Rain misted over the city. Soft rain. He looked at her as she stepped outside. No bodyguards? She asked. They're nearby. Of course they are. I didn't want them in the way. Of what? Luca stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching her mattered more than owning the space between them. Of asking. Elena's heart changed rhythm. He held out something small, not diamonds, not keys, not anything that looked like a man trying to buy forgiveness. It was her mother's old gold bracelet, the one Elena had sold years ago to fix her car. Her breath caught. How? Sophia found the pawn record. Elena stared at the bracelet in his palm. You bought it back? Yes. Luca, I know it doesn't repair anything. No, she whispered. It doesn't. His hand lowered slightly. I only thought something that loved you before all this should come home. Elena's throat tightened so painfully she had to look away. The city moved around them. Cars hissed over wet streets. Hospital lights glowed behind glass. Somewhere inside, monitors beeped and nurses called names and life continued, fragile and stubborn. Elena looked back at him. Then she held out her wrist. Luca's eyes changed. Carefully, almost reverently, he fastened the bracelet around her. His fingers brushed her skin. Neither of them moved away. You're still dangerous, she said. Yes. You still scare half the city. Only half? She gave him a look. A faint smile touched his mouth, then faded. I will never pretend to be innocent for you, Elena. Good, she said. I'd know you were lying. His eyes held hers. But I can be honest, he said. I can be patient. I can be whatever keeps your heart free, even if it never chooses me. Elena felt the words settle deep. Once, she had thought love meant being chosen by someone else. Now she understood it had to begin with choosing herself. So when she stepped closer to Luca Moretti, it was not because he had saved her, not because he had power, not because he had looked at her in the dark and said, "Don't leave." It was because she wanted to. She placed her hand gently over his chest, careful of the healing wound. Beneath her palm, his heartbeat answered. The same heartbeat she had held together under screaming monitors. The same heartbeat that had dragged her into a war. The same heartbeat that now slowed beneath her touch, as if even the monster in him knew peace when it felt her. Luca looked down at her hand, then back at her. "Elena," he whispered. She smiled softly. "I'm here." And for the first time, those words did not feel like a promise made in fear. They felt like a beginning.